writing it. So the question is marijuana medicine? I want to talk to you about perception versus reality. This is reality. This is marijuana medicine for sale in some of the medical marijuana states. And I know that you'll recognize the medical terminology of some of these medicines, such as alkynic kush, blueberry dream, purple diesel, sour diesel. This is it, folks. This is what's being sold in medical marijuana dispensaries in the states that have legalized it. There are also half-gram joints in packages for medical use, and then there are also edibles. All of these pictures that I'm going to show you on this slide and the next one are marijuana-infused foods that are being sold in the states of legalized marijuana for medical use. So we have fruit-flavored soft drinks that appeal to kids, sour gummy bears that appeal to children, Jolly Ranchers that appeal to children, Nutella, hazelnut spread with medical marijuana in it, cannabis brownies, and my favorite, cotton candy. Toddlers and preschoolers are being rushed to emergency rooms after eating medicines like these that they find around the house. And some of them have to be hospitalized, and some of them are put into comas in order to treat them and then make them better. These are dispensaries, places where people go to buy their marijuana. The one up here is called the Little Green Pharmacy, the big one on the left. The one in the upper right corner is from Venice Beach, where the doctor is in, and for $40 will give you an exam and a medical marijuana card, and up the stage you go to buy your pot. States that have legalized medical marijuana have included more than 250 different diseases that they say at various states, at various levels, medical marijuana will either cure or relieve the symptoms of. But what does the science say? There have been no randomized controlled trials of any legal medical marijuana product to demonstrate that it's safe or effective for treating any disease. Not one medical marijuana maker in any medical marijuana state has submitted his product to the Food and Drug Administration for approval as safe and effective to market to the public. None of the medicines have been purified, tested in animals for safety, and tested in humans for efficacy, which are the requirements that FDA imposes upon all drug makers. Most states do not require testing for contaminants or potency, and random tests are finding there are molds, mildews, pesticides, even E. coli and salmonella in some medical marijuana products. In fact, Colorado, which legalized marijuana for medical use in the year 2000, only last month, in 2015, began testing for pesticides after the Denver Post did an expose and tested some of the medical marijuana edibles that people were buying and finding them to be filled with high levels of pesticides. The governor has now issued an executive order saying all marijuana grown in the state must be tested and destroyed immediately if it has pesticides in it, 15 years later after the fact. There are some real marijuana medicines that are made from marijuana components. Two of those are Ranol and Sesamet, which are synthetic THC that were approved by FDA in the 1980s for treating chemotherapy-related nausea and AIDS wasting. There are two more coming to market and are in clinical trials in the United States. One is called Sativex. It's 50% extracted THC and 50% cannabidiol, or CBD. It's a mouth spray to treat MS. 30 countries have approved it. It's likely to be approved in our country soon. And then there's Epidiolex, which is extracted cannabidiol, CBD. It is 98% CBD with 0.2% THC. It is designed specifically to treat epilepsy in children with severe forms of the disease. It is in FDA clinical trials. I'm happy to say that because of the wisdom of our governor, it is available in clinical trials here in Georgia. It's being tested right now. And we have an FDA expanded access program, which means that any child in Georgia with epilepsy can access Epidiolex for free, thanks to the governor. So to summarize, here's the difference between FDA-approved medicines and legalized marijuana medicines. FDA-approved medicines are pure. There's no guarantee of purity in those that have been legalized but not approved by FDA. Patients are told through informed consent what all of the known side effects are of the experimental drug they're going to be taking, and they sign a form saying they understand that they will still like to participate. There's no informed consent with any of the medicines in the states that have legalized marijuana for medical use. FDA requires random controlled trials, no RCTs in medical marijuana states. FDA requires proof of safety and proof of efficacy, no such thing in the states that have legalized marijuana for medical use. There is a recall system in place. Doctors know to report side effects that may show up after a drug has been approved by FDA and is used by a much larger population. And the doctors report those side effects. The FDA can recall the drug if it's dangerous to people. Doctors can prescribe FDA-approved medicines. They cannot prescribe, though you've read it in every newspaper in the country, that doctors are prescribing legalized marijuana medicine. They are not. They cannot do that legally. They can either recommend marijuana or they certify that a patient has a disease that both advocates and or legislators have decided should treat that disease with marijuana. Pharmacies can sell FDA-approved drugs. Dispensaries, as you saw earlier, are what sell medical marijuana. Pharmacists dispense these drugs, FDA-approved drugs. Bud tenders dispense medical marijuana. Bud tenders are people who have no medical training, who kind of work by crowdsourcing. Somebody comes in the migraine and says, I need a strain for my migraine, and the bud tender says, well, someone was here just 2 weeks ago with migraine, and they've tried sour diesel. It's really working well for them. Why don't you try that? Almost all medical associations oppose legalizing marijuana for medical use. I won't read them all to you, but you can see them here on this list. Pennsylvania has a bill that is going through, a medical marijuana bill, that's working its way through the legislature, and these are all the Pennsylvania medical associations that oppose legalizing marijuana for medical use. California was the first state to legalize marijuana for medical use. It did so in 1996, and you can see that marijuana use in the country has doubled since 1996. Then 10 million people in the United States used marijuana on a regular or past month basis. Today, 22.2 million do. That has implications for all of our children, the 2 million kids, including the 2 million kids in Georgia. So, does Georgia have to legalize growing marijuana for kids with epilepsy? No. CBD oils are shipped to all 50 states and can be bought on Amazon. As we speak, I challenge you to go to Amazon and type in Charlotte's Web or any CBD oil preparation. That's the end of my presentation. How'd I do? Am I in 10 minutes?
Yep, you sure did. Very good. Very
Thank
good.
you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Rushi? There you go.
Okay. I actually did a presentation to Family Medicine.
Can't hear you.
Okay, I did a presentation recently to neurologists and family medicine. And I went back and pulled there's a study, a systematic review of trials that have been done since the 1940s on cannabinoid formulations, and they included oral extracts as well as the Sesimex, Mirinol, and Sativex in the study. And they did prove in those studies that there are cases and conditions in which both the pharmaceutical grade products as well as the extract are effective. These are clinical trials that have been done. So I just want to point out that there actually are studies that have shown. I also want to point out since over 2,000 years, the Chinese have actually used marijuana, which is, I think we need to be careful to say the term cannabinoid instead of marijuana because it's more accurate. For over 2,000 years, it's been used in China. It was used here in the U.S. until the late 1930s and early 40s. It was in the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, which is the book that houses really all pharmaceutical products here in the U.S. It was actually criminalized in the late 1930s, early 1940s. Prior to that, cannabinoids were used here in the U.S. So just historical evidence we have that information.
Thank you, Dr. Reese. And then, Mr. Richard, thank you for being here. As you know, you and I have had a lot of discussion about this issue, and we disagree tremendously. And I could spend probably the rest of the day disputing some of the assertions you made. Let me just address one. I just got back from Minnesota on Monday, where I visited a dispensary in Minnesota. Walked in, went through the process that a normal customer would do, go through, and it was not a bud tender that provided me or would have provided me the patient the product. It was actually a pharmacist who was trained in how to dose the medicine. And so just keep that in mind as you share your testimony. It's not just bud tenders; they're trained pharmacists in Minnesota.
Maybe in Minnesota, but not in the other medical marijuana states.
Maybe not. So, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate you being here. Okay, next on the agenda, Mr. Mike Griffin, Board of Baptist Convention. If you'll come up, you can pass out your can. We'll just start sending around this way.
It is a testimony and a resolution. Take one's wife.
Mr. Griffin, you want to come to the table? Mr. Griffin, if you'll, I know who you are, but many members of the commission may not. I've enjoyed knowing you and hearing from you over the years, and so we're glad to have you here. You got go ahead with your presentation. You got some stuff on that now. Try it again.
Test 1, 2.
Try it again.
Test 1, 2. Test 2.
Hit it one more time.
Here's something. Cut off.
We'll do the best we can.
I'm a Baptist preacher. I'm supposed to holler. You get off loud. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of Georgia Baptist Convention, I also have Dr. Gerald Harris, who is the editor of the Christian Index, the state paper of the Georgia Baptist Convention, with me as well today to testify on behalf of Georgia Baptist. My name is Mike Griffin. I'm Public Affairs Representative for the Georgia Baptist Convention. As a way of background, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been married for over 37 years. I have 4 children and 5 grandchildren. I know I look too young. I was born and raised in Georgia. I've been a Georgia Baptist pastor for over 31 years. As a pastor, I spent a lot of time in hospitals and ministering to many people with varying illnesses. I've conducted so many funerals that I've lost count of the number. I've been with folks in our congregation when they were diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I've held their hand when they went to be with the Lord. For 8 years, I have represented Georgia Right to Life as their legislative director, and very familiar with the sanctity of human life issues. Now I'm in my 2nd year representing the Georgia Baptist Convention with its 1.4 million Baptists and almost 3,600 churches. In this capacity, I have attended many of the hearings on the legalization of medical marijuana. I've also attended some of the press conferences and met many of the parents who have lobbied to get the treatment they believe best for their children. I've heard the many testimonies. I prayed with a troubled mother who was desperate for help in treating the suffering of her child. But I also want to thank Representative Alan Peake and those legislators who have worked tirelessly to find ways to legally and effectively treat Georgia citizens who battle severe medical illnesses. And not enough can be said for the love and the dedication of parents and others who are doing everything in their power to try to find the most effective medical treatment for their family and friends. And may God bless them in their efforts. Having observed firsthand many sincere people fighting for the legalization of medical marijuana, it'd be hard for me to believe that these families are doing what they're doing because their ultimate goal is to make recreational marijuana legal. Furthermore, I think it would be a wrong and gross mischaracterization to say that just because someone is in favor of medical marijuana, that they are also in favor of the legalization of recreational marijuana. I think that's important. However, on the other hand, I also believe it is a gross mischaracterization to say that if someone is against the legalization of drugs not approved by the Food and Drug Administration or the cultivation of an illegal plant like marijuana, that they are against children and adults seeking help in dealing with their pain and suffering. It's just simply not true. There's a lot of good people who can respectfully disagree on trying to achieve the same goal. It's been stated over and over again by some legislators supporting medical marijuana that the furthest thing from their minds is the legalization of recreational marijuana. And furthermore, these same legislators promise to do everything in their power to never see recreational marijuana come to Georgia. Now, what this tells me is that there are legislators who believe that marijuana is an extremely dangerous drug to be put into the hands of the general public. And this also tells me that many legislators are aware that the legalization of medical marijuana has always preceded the justification of recreational use. Even right here in our own state, I know there's at least one or more bills that have already been introduced for recreational marijuana. This is specifically the concern of the Georgia Baptist Convention when it comes to cultivation of marijuana in our state. At the present time, the Georgia Baptist Convention has not taken an official position for or against the use of medical marijuana for certain medical conditions. Although during the hearings in the Senate on SB 185, we did speak in favor of clinical trials where patients would be closely monitored to ensure the safest results. However, last month at our annual convention meeting, the Georgia Baptists unanimously passed a resolution entitled "The Dangers of Marijuana." The resolution stated our opposition to not only the sale and the use of recreational marijuana, but also our opposition to the cultivation of the plant in Georgia. That is what I'm here to call your attention to today. The resolution which you have a copy of, there's a part in it that says, "Therefore be resolved that we urge the members of the Georgia Legislature to oppose any legalization that would authorize the cultivation of marijuana in the state of Georgia. We recognize the difficult position that the legislature is in when it's legalized a substance that it cannot grow itself. However, there comes a time when the unprecedented consequences outweigh the intended ones, and we feel that time has come. I think all of us have become very leery of government making promises that it either does not intend to keep or simply cannot keep. I accept the word of those legislators who say the legalization of recreational marijuana is not their intent for Georgia. However, legislators cannot promise that they will always be in office. These incremental steps of medical legalization have been used by recreational proponents to push an agenda that has nothing to do with the wishes of the parents and others that are here today. I think it's wise for all of us to be careful that we not get so close to the forest that we can't see the trees. Cultivation of marijuana in our state, even for medical purposes, pushes us to a line that will be impossible to maintain. The Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians 10 and 23 through 24, it says, "All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor." When I think about this passage, I'm reminded that in determining government policy, it's not just about how one group of citizens can be impacted by legislation that's supported, but how could it potentially affect all citizens one day. The consequences of growing marijuana, of allowing marijuana to be grown in Georgia, does create a difficult law enforcement challenge, and it does put the state a step closer to the legalization of recreational use. For the sake of all of our children and families in Georgia, this is a risk that we feel as Georgia Baptists is too great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it over with your permission to Dr. Harris to make some comments.
Dr. Harris, you got through. Why don't you grab the mic and make sure we can hear you? I will ask you, Mr. Griffin, took up the bulk of your time, so
I understand. I expected that you would. Thank you so very much. I'm delighted to be here today. I know the governor has indicated that he believes it would be very difficult to control the cultivation and the distribution of the plant in Georgia. I had a conversation with the Commissioner of Agriculture yesterday. He indicated that it would place the agricultural department in a very untenable position because he has nobody in his department that has a badge or carries a gun, so it would be very easy for him to control it. The Association of Sheriffs in the state has come out opposing the growing of any kind of marijuana. And I am a layman when it comes to politics. I don't know very much about politics, but it would appear to me that last year when the bill was passed to legalize medical marijuana, that there would have also been a part of that bill that would have indicated a way to access it. And the perception, therefore, is that since that was not included, that this is an incremental step toward recreational marijuana. And I know that some of you have indicated that it is not your intent at all, and I believe that. But those who may succeed you in office may not have the same opinion that you have about this, and so I do fear that it could be eventually an incremental step toward that. The states that have legalized recreational marijuana started with medical marijuana, and generally it takes 12 to 15 years for that to take place, but this is a concern, and it is a perception that I believe exists in our state.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Are there any questions for Dr. Harris or Mr. We appreciate what the Georgia Baptist Convention does and stands and makes for families all over our state. And I'm a member of the Baptist Church in Macon, one of the largest ones in the state, Ingleside Baptist. I want to just make sure you're clear that you're saying that the resolution states that the convention, which represents all the Baptists in the state, are opposed to even growing of marijuana for medicinal purposes. Is that correct?
That's true. They're against the convention that assembled and voted this resolution. We have not taken a position for or against the use of cannabis oils or any type of medical marijuana. We've only spoken in favor of the clinical trials, but the official position of the convention is to be against recreational use and then against all cultivation because of it being an incremental step. Kind of like playing football. We feel like we should play for field position, not just at the goal line, and that this can create some problems in a number of areas, not just to the full legalization of marijuana one day, but also some pretty difficult impossibilities regarding criminal activity and being able to legislate this, and also the perception that happens that marijuana becomes more and more socially accepted on the recreational side every time. So we're just concerned about that.
But you do understand there's a distinct difference of growing marijuana for medicinal purposes and growing it for recreational purposes.
I do understand there are two different objectives. However, I think they get clouded when it comes to enforcement.
Yeah. It's interesting, there was a recent poll we may have seen on Monday that 84% of Georgians have stated that they or support expanding the current law to allow for growing cultivation of medical cannabis oil in a strictly tightly regulated system.
Well, I believe that.
So I'm assuming maybe the other 16% of the Presbyterian and the Methodist
it's a very emotional.
Since 84% of our state is probably Baptist, so
it's become a very emotional issue, and it's become a very extremely political issue. And I think that when the legislature becomes more of a medical grounds of determining things, when you have federal agencies that are supposed to be vetting these types of things, and I just think there's good balance in hearing the complete picture of not just one time at one instance the important issue, but how is it going to look 10 years from now potentially. And I think that's the concern of not just a group of children. What about all children that may be impacted if one day we have a legalization, which it typically of all marijuana, which comes incrementally.
And I understand those concerns. I'm not sure any of us can predict what's going to happen in 10 years.
But that's part of our
Representative Dempsey. But I think that applies to tax code, it applies to the one day we may have a Democratic controlled legislature. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in 10 years, so.
I can't comment on that.
Representative Denson?
Just to follow up on that, I have one question, which is, I know we often go right to the children, but there's so many adults that want this product right now too, so it's important to keep that in the focus. But I wondered if you have the exact language that was put before your body to
Yes, you
get
have.
that vote. I know we have, but the question that was posed that they voted on to oppose marijuana across the board, I just wondered if
It's in the resolution. When a resolution is passed,
The resolution is recommended by somebody to a resolutions committee. They draft the resolution, and then the convention votes on it. The resolution expresses the opinion and the views of the messengers who were present for that particular convention.
Georgia Baptists believe in local autonomy, so this resolution is non-binding on churches. So we're not a top-down or bottom-up. And so churches are autonomous, and so are Baptists. And I can't speak for all Georgia Baptists. I can only speak for the Georgia Baptist Convention when it convenes and what it says when it's there and when those churches send their messages.
And I certainly respect that, because as a Methodist, there are certain things that the body of Methodists that make those votes that I might not personally agree with either. So I understand where it's coming from, but I just wondered if they really had the focus as it was developed and voted on the difference of what we are looking at, which is medical and not recreational.
Well, I think you could say the same thing about the 84% of the people that were polled and indicated a desire to see an expansion of the marijuana legislation. I don't know how informed all of those people were. This is a very emotional issue. I had a sister who had a very serious physical handicap. I wish there would have been something available to help her at the time, but there was not. But I think at the same time, we have to get beyond the emotion of the thing and look at all of the facts and then make a wise decision based upon your own conscience and your own convictions. And I'm sure that is what Georgia Baptists did from their point of view.
Well, thank you. We appreciate y'all being here today, and again, thanks for all the work y'all doing and all this stuff. Okay, we're gonna before our next folks come up, I think everybody is here now. We have most of our members here. Let me just go through a couple of housekeeping issues. To the members of the committee that are non-state employees, we have a little sign-up sheet to make sure. I don't think we've done a very good job of making sure that we've got you guys taken care of from a per diem standpoint. And so I think I've gotten everybody, Dr. Whitmore and Dr. Parker. Chief, make sure we get that taken care of. I want to introduce the commission members real quick. Again, welcome everybody here. Let's introduce everybody real quick. Brian Rickman, as district attorney from Mountain Judicial Court, is here, and soon to be judge. Since we last met, he's been appointed to the Court of Appeals, and so congratulations to soon to be judge or justice. I guess that's Judge Brian Rickman. Yeah. We're proud of you. Dr. Cynthia Wetmore, who's oncologist at Emory University. Dr. Young Park, who's leading the neurologist at Georgia Regents, who's leading the dialysis trials for our state. Dr. Mark Murphy, gastroenterologist from Savannah. Dr. Mandy Reese, who's the School of Pharmacy in Gainesville. Chief Stacy Cotton from Police Chief in Covington. Sheriff Gary Gullich from Paulding County. Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, who's our Commissioner of Public Health. Director Vernon Keenan, who's our Director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Director Rick Allen, who's Director of the Georgia Drugs and Narcotics Agency. Gary Black is not here. I think he was going to be here as our Commissioner of Agriculture. Ryan Teague, who's the Governor Deal's Executive Counsel. Katie Dempsey from the Georgia State House, representing the Rome area. And Renee Underman and Butch Miller from the Senate. Butch will be here a little later. Renee will not be here today. I'm Alan Peake, State Representative from Macon. Thank you again to all of you for being here for our fifth commission meeting. So we'll go right back into the testimony. We're going to keep moving forward as we have 4 or 5 other folks who are going to chat. Is Dr. Milford Green here? Yes, Dr. Green, who is with the Sickle Cell Foundation, and Deb McCrary. Okay. I'm glad to have both of y'all here today. I think you heard earlier we're moving quickly, so we got about 5 to 10 minutes, and so we're glad to have you here. Why don't you just identify yourselves again, who you represent, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Representative Peake. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay. Have you got your
Representative Peake, our honorable members of the Cannabis Commission, distinguished and honorable other elected officials, ladies and gentlemen, I am Director of the Health Affairs and Clinical Services branch at the Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia. My name is Milford Green. I am a biological and public health scientist, and I also am a retired professor, having taught at 3 universities of medical schools, and 2 of which are here in Georgia. It's my pleasure to be here with my esteemed colleague, Mrs. Jackie George, who is also a genetic counselor and health educator at the foundation. We thank you for the opportunity to provide remarks in support of an in-state regulatory structure with production of medical cannabis. On behalf of the Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia, more than 7,300 citizens of Georgia suffer the ravages of sickle cell disease, and for their families as well. These are citizens who suffer pain, crises, anxiety, stress, and debilitating nausea. Citizens for whom medical cannabis legislation and the opportunity to use medical cannabis to relieve pain, crises, and related symptomology borders on nothing less than miraculous. It is for these individuals that we make these remarks this morning. The number one reason for sickle cell disease patient hospital and emergency room visits is pain crisis. An in-state medical cannabis regulatory structure will not only assuredly affect affordability in a most positive way. Approximately 97% of the people who suffer from this disease are African American, and a very significant number of these individuals are also economically challenged. Patients are often too sick to work. Moreover, many of these patients are employed by people who are less knowledgeable and less sensitive to their health needs. A well-documented study funded by the Centers for Disease Control, which is entitled The Registry and Surveillance System for Hemoglobinopathies. This is also, there's also an academic award called the RUSH study. This was done between 2004 and 2008, a 5-year period. It documented that there were 4,993 people in 9 Georgia counties, 159 counties. These are counties Chatham, Clayton, Cobb, DeKalb, Doherty, Fulton, Gwinnett, and Muskogee, also Richmond County. They reported 64,641 hospital and emergency room visits compared to 19,200 overnight hospital stays. The 20 to 29 age group made most of these visits to the ER room, which was 16,000, more than 16,000, and had also most of the hospital stays. This population has transitioned from pediatric to adult care and is known to be experiencing severe difficulties as a result. An in-state regulatory structure for medical cannabis is far more likely to take into consideration, 1, sickle cell disease as a health disparity, 2, the extremely low hematologist to patient ratio, 3, the difficulty patients experience in obtaining access to the Georgia Patient Registry, primarily because of provider shortages and also because of minimal knowledge of some of these providers, and also 4, the existence of an economic or income disparity among sickle cell disease patients in Georgia. The Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia supports an in-state regulatory structure and believes that this model will not only serve sickle disease patients' interests as well as all of the individuals from the other 8 diseases on that were part of the legislation, but it will also help drive down the cost of care and create for Georgia a new economic engine that will encourage also minority participation across the structure. Again, we thank the Commission for the opportunity to address you this morning, and are pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Green.
I just have the information that he referred to from the CDC studies.
Okay, all right. Why don't you hang on, we'll pass that in just a minute because we have some questions for everyone. Are there any questions for Dr. Green, or is it Ms. George or Dr. George?
No, just check.
Okay, Ms. George. My understanding, I'm sorry, yes, Dr. Fitzgerald.
I'm Dr. Fitzgerald. Public Health runs a registry. One thing that perhaps I'll be sure and share with the members of the organization, that it does not require a hematologist to grant certification to the registry. It is any medically certified, any person who is on the medical board.
Thank you, Dr. Fitzgerald. We are aware of that. However, we're talking about individuals, providers who are very knowledgeable of this disease, and the numbers are they're minimal beyond.
I understand. I mean, sickle cell certainly is a very devastating problem.
The problem that we're hearing from clients or patients from the state is that the providers are very, very reluctant as to signing up individuals to be on the registry. They are saying that there's not enough information, there's not enough studies. So they, to this fact, and I wanted to find out from your office how many patients have signed up, but all the calls we're getting, doctors are refusing to sign them up, even be a part of the registry.
I can provide that information for you. There are now 7 sickle cell patients that are properly registered with the state. We have 415 as of last Friday that have registered properly with the state. 7 of those are sickle cell patients. So, that part.
My name is Young Paul, neurologist. I'm aware of the concern and problem and taking care of the 6 crisis, 10 crisis to all those individuals. But do you aware, or Dr. Whitmore aware that are there any ongoing studies for that setting using the either mixture of the THC and CBD or CBD? Are there any intention to developing or any study currently? Do you aware of that?
I know the one in California, that's the one in Minnesota, but I think she's working with out of California, Dr. Kutler. She's done the study, but she's doing the vapor, not the medical cannabis. There have been studies, if I'm not mistaken, in Europe. There have been some things done in the islands, but they're a little different than the medical oil. But it has proven to be very, very successful for sickle cell patients.
I've been in discussions, some with GW and other sources, and we've been talking at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta of putting together a study. I've also spoken with NIH funders, and they're quite open to a study with a formal, research study for enrolling sickle cell patients to assess whether or not the cannabidiol oil, the low THC oil, is helpful in treating sickle cell pain.
Thank you.
So we have that in the works.
Thank you.
It's not close yet, but it's in the works.
It's okay, as long as it's in the works. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you all for being here. Appreciate the testimony. Thanks for the work you're doing. Yes, if you'll leave those, we'll just start right there. We'll just pass them out.
Thank you.
Thanks for the work you're doing to help all the sickle cell patients in the state.
Thank you.
Speaking of the registry, and let me just, I've got some numbers here. Dr. Fitzgerald, you can correct me if I'm getting it wrong. Just for the sake of information, there are now on the registry that has been in effect now since the middle of June, up and down, running 415 patients registered with the state. Just for the sake of the committee's information, that breaks down 214 are seizure patients, 84 are cancer patients, 49 are MS patients, 29 are Crohn's disease patients, 24 are mitochondrial disease patients, 7 are sickle cell, and 5 are Parkinson's disease. That's how it breaks down. And there are now, I think the last count I saw was just a hair over 200 doctors who are certified, registered with the state to properly certify patients as well too. So off to a good start, and a big shout out to Department of Public Health for making that happen too. So. Okay, our next presenter, Mr. Joshua Luttrell. Joshua, are you here?
Yes, sir.
Tell me if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly or not.
It's Luttrell when you get outside the county line.
Welcome to come up there and make sure we're on, and once you introduce yourself, tell folks who you represent, and you got about 5-10 minutes.
Well, good morning, everyone. Representative Peake, I really want to say thank you to you and the members of the commission for giving us the opportunity to speak. I think you all see me in here from time to time with a lot less facial hair, I'm sure, but it's no shade November, and I'm just rolling until we get into state cultivation laws.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, all right.
Good morning. I'm Joshua Luttrell. I'm founder and CEO of Veterans for Cannabis. And I'm going to reference it as VFC from now on. And we all know that veterans like their acronyms, so that's what it is. It's VFC. You know, I learned a long time ago that when someone asks what you do, you tell them why you do what you do, and then they won't have to ask you what it is that you do. I'm an American-born, Georgian-raised combat veteran in the United States Air Force. I made a choice when I was 17 years old to do something that I had dreamed of my whole life. I knew when I was a child that I wanted to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. I can remember some of my earliest memories being with my mother telling me that I should never pick on someone because of the way they look, talk, or act. She always said, Joshua, you have to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. You have to defend those who can't defend themselves. So when I was 17, I enlisted in the United States Air Force. I did this because I wanted to protect my country, my family, and my friends. In 2003, I had the opportunity to serve them all in Operation Iraqi Freedom. I served 6 years in the United States Air Force, where I completed 2 tours overseas, and I received an honorable discharge from the United States Air Force. I got out, went to college at Georgia Gwinnett, and got my business degree, and never looked back. You know, I thought that when I put my guns down and stopped fighting in combat, that I would be done with war. But that's not the case. We are fighting. I'm fighting a battle, and hopefully we're going to have an opportunity to save lives. I can honestly say that when I completed my enlistment and served my commitment out, that's what I did. I thought I was done at that point in time. But you know what? I'm sitting in front of you all this morning because I've been called upon. My fellow airmen, soldiers, sailors, and Marines have called upon me to take charge of this battle. I represent the most diverse minority group in this country. I represent veterans. I represent those who have sacrificed more than any other population in history, and they continue to do so every single day. We're black, we're white, we're Hispanic, we're Asian, we're Muslim, we're German, we're Italian. The list goes on and on. We're made up of everything across the board. We are doctors, lawyers, advisors, coaches, CEOs, managers, state representatives, state senators, just to name a few. Veterans are a very proud group who more oftentimes than not decide to stay out of the limelight, because that's not where they're at. They're humble, compassionate, strong, and intelligent. Veterans expect those in service to serve to alleviate any concerns you may have with the in-state cultivation model. Sir, VFC and the other legal growers in this state will not be the ones you'll have to worry about. I can promise you that. In fact, our transparency and availability for cross-functionality with law enforcement will free up your time and officers to find the drug dealers who are selling crack, heroin, pills, meth, cocaine. You all can concentrate on stopping those who are taking lives. You will not have to worry about those of us who are willing to cultivate cannabis legally and who will be saving lives. Sir, I ask that you and the committee please recommend a whole plant in-state cultivation model. On November 11th this year, just like every other year in my life, I pause to remember those who fought for our freedom. Those who died for our freedom and those who still continue to fight for our freedom. On that very day this year, the Senate passed H.R. 2029. Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Related Agencies Appropriations Act 2016. Judge Rickman, this now allows the Veterans Administration physicians to make a recommendation to their patients for medical cannabis. This is a seismic shift in policy, sir. Because up until now, veterans who were seeing benefits from medical cannabis were being denied care because they were testing positive for cannabis when they're going in to get their medicine or treatment. These veterans were choosing to live illegally than to die legally at the hands of the VA. Now, this will no longer be the case in states where it's legal to use cannabis as a treatment because of this resolution. This is why the timing of this hearing and the committee's recommendation for an in-state cultivation model could not be any more appropriate. Members of the committee, today you may see this as a culmination of a lot of hard work, dedication, time spent on something that you all may know and believe in wholeheartedly. I know that some of you are on the fence about this subject as well. Some of you all may have thought, and I quote the director of the DEA, he says that medical cannabis is a joke. Well, hopefully what I've said today has changed your mind. What I've said has had an impact. And at that time, and that any time you save a life, it's not a joke. Today can be a day that Georgia can lead the way in the South. Join the other 84% of your state that says we need to expand our medical cannabis program here in Georgia. The people in our state have spoken, 84% support. VFC urges this committee to recommend an in-state cultivation model, allow for full plant-based cannabis production without limiting THC content, put residency requirements on those who are allowed to cultivate, encourage small businesses by not having outlandish bonding requirements, cash on hand to apply and be approved for a license, allow for those small businesses to have enough time to gather the cash and investors to establish infrastructure, expand the list of conditions to include the ones I mentioned before, allow for additional delivery options such as vaporizing, consuming edibles, and smoking full plant-based cannabis. In closing, members of the committee, I charge you all with making a difference. I charge you all with being leaders in the South. I charge you all with saving lives. Please save lives. No one has ever died from an overdose of cannabis, and no one ever will. I wanted to point that out, that we're only a couple of miles away from the King Center, a place that houses so much historical significance, and that it comes as a battle that is similar to this one. I'm going to close with a quote from the great Dr. Martin Luther King, and I quote, "I submit that an individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust, and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice, is in reality expressing the highest respect for the law." Thank you all for your time.
Just remind everyone, this is testimony here, and keep it a quorum as best you can. Okay, any questions for Mr. Latrell? Yep. Press your button there for me. There you go.
I have a question regarding, when you were talking about the new law that was passed allowing the VA physicians to certify the patient?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that only available in states where there is a medical marijuana legalized?
That is correct. The legislation states that if a state has a medical cannabis program in place, then that VA facility, that VA physician can make a recommendation for those patients there. So
would Georgia qualify then?
Georgia does qualify. Georgia does qualify, but unfortunately, that list is so small that we're not really being able to treat any of the veterans.
And the challenge would be still that the veteran would have to access the product somewhere.
Right.
Let's see, Dr. Park.
I want to have one comment. I do hear many problems of the heart, taken care of, but because of that problem is many, it's not necessary to the medical marijuana is also the problem. This is not the only one answer to taking care of all those things. Because of this problem, and the problem may be persistent, that should not be the case. The old, like the example of PTSD, etc., medical marijuana is not the only one solution. Many other factors there. If you're seeking the problem, always working with not only the physicians but many other support groups to support all those individuals who suffer from those problems. But so that means the person who wants to willing to support or taken care of has to have the knowledge what the product is controlled, how much is controlled, what's the side effects, etc., etc. but we don't have those kinds of information yet.
We do.
So that is my comment. So we have to some considerations about those issues.
Yeah, I'll speak to that.
Hang on a second, sir, Mr. Trail. I just want to make sure everybody understands. You got comments in the crowd, you keep them to yourself. This is a hearing where we're going to hear from folks who are testifying and from the commission members. And if there's any disruption of that, we will ask you to leave. So go ahead, Mr. Trail.
Yeah, there's some good data out there, Dr. Park, in the states where it is legal. And, you know, I know some of it is anecdotal, but the thing I can tell you is that when I was in Vermont and I actually grew up there, that's how I got exposed to this. Some of you all may have seen my testimony last year as representative people allowed me the opportunity to speak. It works. I mean, it just flat works. That's all I can tell you. What doesn't work is when you go to war and you come back a different person. And you know you're going to be different when you leave. But when you come back and the VA gives you a handful of meds that make you a zombie, that literally keep you in a catatonic state all day long, that's what doesn't work. So we need an opportunity to have additional alternative medicines so that if it does work, we can allow that. Now, medication does work for some people for PTSD. It does. The pills do. But it doesn't work for everyone. And it's those who are high energy, that drive, that don't want to be zombies. They can't afford to be zombies. Those are the ones who are committing suicide because they can't find themselves again. They need to find themselves. And medical cannabis helps them find themselves. It allows them to have some relief, immediate relief as well. When they're having those bad thoughts and they get in that bad place where you can't get out of it, and it's a tunnel. It's bad. You get out of it with medical cannabis. I can tell you that. The pills don't work. You have to titrate up to them, and you have to get so many in your system. But the cannabis, it's immediate.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Mr. Point, thank you for your service to our country. We greatly appreciate that, and we appreciate the passion you have for this issue. And we'll sure take all the comments you give under consideration.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you for everything.
Sure. Okay. All right, we're going to keep moving along. Mr. Cotton, Sebastian Cotton. Come up and chat with us for a little bit. Same thing, Mr. Cotton. We're glad to have you here today. We've got a lot of folks, so if you'll keep your comments 5 or 10 minutes, and look forward to hearing from this one.
I'm sure you don't want me to speak too fast.
Yeah. In French, you speak way too fast.
Well, my name is Sebastian Codd, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to testify. Last time I testified was September 2014, back in Macon. And at that time, my wife Annette and my son Jagger and I just moved to Colorado about 2 weeks before that. What was a trip that was supposed to be maybe 3 or 4 months, and it turned into a year. And we just got back from Colorado a couple months ago. And this is a trip, and this is a year that will forever change our life. And the welcome and the hope that we find in Colorado has just been absolutely amazing. My son Jagger has a very rare mitochondrial disease. It's a terminal disease. He's on hospice care. There's no treatment. There's no cure for his disease. And he already passed his life expectancy for over a year now. He just turned 5, and life expectancy was around 4 years old. So I'm now here today to debate on the merit of medical cannabis. I think all of you guys already done your research and your study, and you know, and it's very safe. It has no side effect, and it's beneficial to most patients. But I do want to give a quick update on Jagger. Before we moved to Colorado, Jagger was having about 10 to 15 seizures a day, and he was having daily pain crisis. What I call a pain crisis is when he will scream. Jagger is nonverbal, so he can't speak, and he doesn't cry, he doesn't have any tears. So when something goes wrong, he just screams. And he was screaming in pain, mostly from his muscle in his legs, just tightening up and having spasms. And he would scream for anywhere from 5 minutes on a good day to over an hour on a bad day. And, you know, it's very heartbreaking for a parent to just sit there and watch your kid scream for hours, and there's really nothing we can do. We will try some creams, we will pump him up full of opioids, and half of the time it will not even work. One thing about being on hospice is that we don't have a ceiling on medication. You can use as much as you need to stop the pain, and if the patient dies, then he dies, because that's just what hospice is. Just take care of the pain. Don't worry about the side effects. Don't worry about the long-term consequences, because that's pretty much what being an hospice patient means. Just take care of the pain right now and do what you have to do right now, regardless of the side effect. Since we've been to Colorado and started Jagger on medical cannabis therapy, his seizures are down to about 3 to 5 a day. We even have some seizure-free days. And his pain crisis episodes are down to probably about once, maybe twice a week, but for less than 5 minutes. So that's been just great relief and a great blessing for my wife and I to be able to see him not suffering as much. He's also, since we started cannabis therapy, we have not had to give him morphine or oxycodone one single time. And this is just absolutely amazing when we're giving up to 40 milligrams of morphine a day. And I'm sure some of the doctors already realize for a 4 or 5 years old kid, that's just a crazy amount. Morphine is gone, he expired. He went down the toilet, it's trash, we don't need it anymore. And hopefully we never will need it again. He has improved his quality of life tremendously. He's tracking again with his eyes. He's smiling again for the first time in years. So I can really say without any doubt that Jagger is still alive today because of medical cannabis. And this is, like I said, without a doubt, this is why we still have our kids, our son with us today. So during the upcoming session, there's going to be a lot of conversation, I'm sure, about adding some conditions, which we need to do, and taking that 1-to-1 ratio out of the bill. So we can bring everybody home. There's still some of us medical refugees back in Colorado, in California, and we just got to bring everybody home. But for today, I just want to focus on the most important thing that we have to do, and the task that you were upon by the governor of in-state, coming with an in-state model for distribution and growing. Last week, Governor Deal said that he was not in favor of in-state cultivation because we only have about 300 patients. Representative Peake said this morning it was about 415, but regardless, it's still a low number. But we created that problem. The reason we have such a low number is because of the restriction in HB1. It's very hard to find a doctor to sign off on a card. There's only 8 conditions, leaving a ton of people out, including PTSD, as we just heard from Josh, and pain patient. And then the main problem is that there is no way to access any product here in Georgia. So, if you think about it, why would somebody wants to give over personal, private, and medical information to a doctor to turn it to the state when they know and they won't even be able to get the medication that they need? If we were to allow cultivation and growing state and add some condition, we can absolutely double or even triple this number very quickly. Number one of the concerns from Governor Deal was after the trip, and some of you took to Colorado. He had some concern from the law enforcement. Then, as some concern with Colorado. Then it was hard to control what was going on in Colorado. And I know some of you guys talked to people in the law enforcement in Colorado. But at this point, this is comparing apples and oranges. We are looking at a medicinal program. Colorado is both medicinal and recreational. So it's really not fair and kind of, honestly, useless to compare those two programs. Now, let's keep in mind that despite all that, the sky is not falling in Colorado. We live there for the last year, and I can just assure you, Colorado is doing just fine. But if the member of the law enforcement still have concern, I'm sure, and I can speak for myself and some of the parents and families behind me, we'll be more than happy to sit down with you and talk about those. Let's hash it out. Let's just come together, and let's just find a way to make this work. Most of us have tried countless medication, therapy, diet, life-threatening surgery without any success. But what gives us strength and courage to fight the medical cannabis daily is the hope of a better day, the hope of a better, longer life for our kids, the hope that we'll be able to access the cannabis oil without having to break up our families or move 1,500 miles away, and the hope that in 2016 we will be able to purchase this product in a safe and efficient manner in Georgia. At this point, all we have left is hope, and we just cannot stop fighting. The day we lose hope, and we would have lost this battle, and we have given up on our kids. We just cannot do that. This is not an option for any of us. We must all work together to make this happen. And I think if we do listen to each other's concern and keep the big picture in mind, that we have to help the suffering patient and the kids in Georgia, then we can come up with a tightly and safe regulated system that will be acceptable to the legislation, to the law enforcement, and to the parents and patients. Because if you think about it right now, how do we get product in Georgia under HB1? Well, there's 3 ways to get product. One is to go to Colorado or another legal state. But it's really irresponsible to ask families of sick children or suffering patients to go 1,500 miles to try to get a product that even then they would have a very hard time getting. Because they would have to go to a recreational dispensary in Colorado, which means they will be taxed up to 30%. And money for most of us, most people with debilitating illnesses or special needs families, money is an issue. Money is very tight. The other problem is Colorado has a lot of restrictions for out-of-state patients, and I'm not sure if you guys know that, or out-of-state visitors. But if you were to walk into a dispensary as a Georgia citizen in Colorado, you cannot buy whatever you want. You have very strict limits on what you can get. And those limits are so strict that you cannot get anything in oil form because it's too concentrated. So you're going to have to buy flowers. So now you're having parents that get flowers. What do you do with those? Well, I guess you could go on YouTube and watch a couple of videos and hope you don't blow up your kitchen and try to make some oil. But, that's not what you should ask parents to do, or patients. That's just wrong. That is not what we should be doing, and that's what happens if we have to go 1,500 miles to Colorado to try to get product for us. The second option is shipping. So, since HB1 passed, and even before that, there's a lot of companies out there that are just preying on desperate parents. And they will try to sell you any kind of industrial hemp from China. And that's the worst thing any of us can do, is to buy a non-tested product. It's usually laced with pesticide, heavy metal, mold, and it can actually create more problems and get our kids sicker. But that product is everywhere, and with the magic of the internet, it's really easily accessible. Now, there are, however, 3 reputable companies that will ship product to Georgia, as we talked in some of the previous hearings. But there's a problem with that. First of all, we can only ship CBD-rich oil that's less than 0.3% THC, so it can be classified under hemp under the 2014 Farm Act. But it's still a gray legal area. It's not been a court precedent. And what unlikely, the DA can put a stop to it tomorrow morning, and all of us getting product to the mail, we lost the supply right away. What will we do then? What's the option? The other problem with that is that oil has less than 0.3% THC. A lot of conditions, a lot of patients require a lot more THC than that. 0.3% THC is not going to touch my son's pen. It's not going to do anything for Josh's PTSD. So we need more options, and shipping is unfortunately not a viable option in the long run in Georgia. So it is one option, just one thing left, the black market. Now, let's not fool ourselves. Black market is everywhere in Georgia. You can go on any college campuses or any street corner and you can buy cannabis. But once again, what are you going to buy? You're not going to buy oil coming from a lab test report. That's not going to happen. You're going to buy flour. And it's not going to be organically grown. You don't know where it's going to come from. It's probably going to have mold on it. And once again, you're asking parents and patients to become chemists. And that is just not something that we should recommend and encourage as a state. But in order to be able to stop that, we have to allow in-state cultivation and growing and have the option to get the product in a safe manner in the states. So those 3 options I talked about getting the medication, moving to a legal state, shipping on the black market, those are very far from ideal. And the problem is, as long as we don't allow cultivation and distributing in Georgia, parents will continue to move out of state, will continue to get stuff on the black market, less and less people will register, and what's going to end up happening? The whole system is going to fall, it's going to collapse. And in a couple of years from now, we won't even have a medical cannabis system in Georgia. So we must act, and we must act now. So I want to thank the Commission and the committee here for everything you've done, and some of you for over 2 years for your amazing work. And I'm really sure we are very close to a solution, but we have to find a solution for the kid, for the patient, and we must do this right, and we must do this in Georgia, and we cannot ask people to keep going to other states. So I just want to finish very quick with a message for Governor Deal, and I know he's not here today, but hopefully you will hear this. And first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you to the Governor for his leadership and for helping us pass HB1 last year, or this year, actually, earlier this year. But as we can hear today from the testimonies from everybody here, HB1 is not nearly enough. We need more. We need more than HB1. And we need the governor's help and leadership to make this happen. And like it or not, Governor Deal, this is actually going to be your legacy. In 5 or 10 years from now, how will people remember your terms as governor? Will they remember you as a caring and compassionate man that gives hope and relief to thousands of suffering patients and kids in Georgia? Or we may remember you as a governor that killed the medical cannabis program and took the hopes away from thousands of Georgians? Winston Churchill once said the price of greatness is responsibility. Governor Dion, now is the time to face your responsibility and take the medical cannabis program to the next level. Now is the time to listen to 84% of Georgians that support an instant cultivation program. Now is the time to achieve greatness and forever define your legacy. Governor Dion, our kids need you to be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions for Ms. Scott? We are glad to have you and Jagger and your wife back in Georgia, too.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for all you've done for us to make this happen. Thank you.
Okay, we got two folks here before we're going to take a quick break. Is Brian here? Brian Underwood?
Yes.
Yes, Brian, why don't you come on up? While he's coming up, Mr. Underwood was someone that I met, and I let him tell his story, and I thought it was unique enough that this commission should hear it briefly. If you got Reed with you,
Yes.
Reed with you? This is Reed Underwood. And you stay at Brian, and I'm sorry, Miss Underwood? Oh, just, okay.
Is there a way I can get a picture of it?
Yes. Is Brent here? Brent? He may not be. If you can plug it into the, I'm sorry, our guy's not here, so. There's a USB plug in there that you make some. While he's figuring out, Brian's story was, like I said, brought to me by someone. Reed has a particular condition, is that correct, that is being looked at by a doctor in Minnesota that has sent us some evidence of cannabis helping his condition.
Right, he's a world-renowned doctor in Minnesota.
Jacob Toller. Okay, Brian, you want to jump in? Yeah, there you go.
Thank you for having us. My name is Brian Underwood. This is my wife Barbara and Reed, and I just wanted to tell you about my son Reed Davis Underwood, who is 1.5, and how he needs you and the state government to expand the law so that cannabis oil is a viable option for Reed. Can you imagine having to torture your child every day to keep them alive? To my wife, Audra, that is a reality that no parent should ever have to endure. Reed has a very rare genetic skin disease called recessive dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa, or RDEB. RDEB is the most tragic disease that you can imagine. Reed was born missing skin from his legs, hands, and back. With RDEB, Reed's body isn't able to produce a critical protein that binds the two layers of skin together. You can think of the protein collagen 7 as the glue that binds the skin and allows both layers to move together when friction is introduced. Without this protein, the skin can blister or tear off with any rubbing or friction. This disease affects any tissue that has a disjunction where the collagen 7 is present, which includes the external skin, the mouth, the esophagus, and the eyes. This damage can be created by basically anything: the seams of clothes, bumping furniture, acting like a normal baby, or a hug from his mom and dad. Just 2 days ago, I was helping Audra when Reed needed a diaper change. You see, a child with RDEB cannot be treated like other babies. Wiping Reed's bottom with a wet wipe can take his skin off. We were holding Reed over the sink and rinsing him off, and after we were finished, I handed Reed over to Audra, and he let out a scream. That is a scary moment, as you know he's hurt himself, but you don't know what he's done. We scanned his body, and just by the way that I was holding him, I tore a piece of skin off of his back the size of a golf ball. I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody how bad that makes a parent feel, that I've just unintentionally hurt my child. When Reed blisters or skin tears off, his skin has to be cleaned to keep infection away. Otter pours a bleach and water solution over his raw skin, as this is one of the only ways to effectively clean the wounds. Reed has chronic wounds that have a hard time healing, especially as he is trying to be mobile like any 1.5-year-old should be. Reed's right leg is the worst wound, and we have pictures in the slideshow where the extreme damage can be seen. I'm sure everyone can relate to getting a blister on your feet or your hands, and how just water stings when you wash your hands. Now imagine that your whole leg, from the shin down to your foot, is completely raw, and you pour bleaching water on that wound. It is heartbreaking as a parent to see, and even more heartbreaking to be a parent that tortures your child to keep them alive. Reed goes through bandage change every day, where Otter will remove the old dressings, look for new damage, clean the area, and apply new dressings. Reed is bandaged with high-tech non-stick bandages that hopefully don't pull the skin off during bandage changes. You never know what you'll find during this process. Otter has to take a hypodermic needle and puncture all of the blisters on Reed's body. Without the protein that binds the skin together, the blisters keep growing if they're not punctured. As soon as Reed sees the needle, he begins to scream because he knows the pain he's about to experience. These blisters can form in areas that can already be completely raw or in previously undamaged areas. Reed will also make kissing sounds or say mama in hopes that Otter will stop, but she can't. Reed underwent a bone marrow transplant last December at 6 months old as part of a research trial conducted by Dr. Jacob Toller at the University of Minnesota. Reed was one of about 30 kids in the world to participate in this experimental treatment, where Reed's sister Avery would donate her healthy stem cells to Reed, and those stem cells could hopefully produce the missing protein. This is far from a cure, but intended to give Reed a better quality of life and hopefully arrest the progression of the disease. This disease is absolutely brutal. The lifespan for a child with RDEB is very short. Those that live into their teens face a life with extreme pain every day. The repeated damage fuses the fingers and toes. Kids have contractures in their hands and feet that cripple them. The kids must have regular dilatation or esophageal strictures that narrow the esophagus. In most all cases, if infection does not kill the child, they develop an aggressive cancer, squamous cell carcinoma. These kids cannot eat regular food, as something as simple as a chip can tear up their mouth and esophagus. These kids get corneal abrasions when their eyelids stick to their corneas as they sleep, and when they open their eyes, their cornea is torn. The result is that they have to wear bandages over their eyes and stay in the dark until their corneas heal. When Reed was 2 months old, we went to a patient conference in Nashville with the purpose of meeting Dr. Toller in person and discussing the transplant. We walked in the door and were blown away at what this disease does. We wondered why there were no adults there with the disease, and we learned that there aren't any adults with severe RDEB. We spoke to several teenagers that explained what life is like living with RDEB. There were horror stories as these kids wanted to die. They couldn't take the pain, and they were on the strongest narcotics available. A number had quit school as they realized that they wouldn't make it long enough to graduate. One kid kept getting in trouble at school because he kept falling asleep in class. But this was due to the massive amounts of morphine that he was taking to control his pain. Sorry.
It's okay.
Reed takes methadone, Dilaudid, Neurontin. He's been on morphine for pain. With the constant healing, RDEB kids itch a lot. Reed takes Ativan, Doxepin, Atarax, Benadryl, and Voriconazole to help control the itching, but that doesn't even come close to touching the issue. We recently found out that some other EB kids that have access to cannabis oil, and the results that they had were amazing. These kids were able to get off and stay off their prescription narcotics. The oil relieved their pain, controlled their itching, and helped with inflammation. Although the narcotics helped with the pain, these narcotics have side effects that are not good for a child with RDEB, including itching and constipation. Although the long-term damage of these drugs, drugs can cause on internal organs. Reed has been on these drugs since day one of his life. Reed's doctor, Jacob Toller, is absolutely brilliant and the most compassionate person you can imagine. All he cares about is helping improve the quality of life for the kids that he treats. He treats them like they are his own kids. Dr. Toller is the only person in the world that we trust for Reed's health. Dr. Toller fully supports the use of cannabis oil and will do anything to make it happen. He just pushed the Minnesota officials to expand the law to include intractable pain, which the advisory panel advised not to include. Good thing the health commissioner in Minnesota did not take the panel's advice and recently approved intractable pain. And mother and a good friend of ours testified, just like I am, about her daughter, who also had the transplant for severe RDEB. This past weekend, I spoke to our pastor, Dr. Gil Watson, at Northside United Methodist Church. Dr. Gil is well known in the Atlanta area and a great religious leader. Dr. Gil loves Reed and prays for him constantly. After researching the disease, Dr. Gil agreed that cannabis oil should be available for Reed and the other kids that need oil as an option for their conditions. People opposed to cannabis oil in general or the expansion of the current law need to look at Reed and what RDEB does to him. His pain is beyond comprehension for you and me. No one can imagine what it feels like to have bleach and water poured over their raw skin. When we were in Minnesota at the Ronald McDonald House, you could hear a neighbor with the same disease screaming across the building when it was bath time just because just water stung and he couldn't take it. One boy who was recently featured on an ESPN documentary said it is like your skin is on fire. I'm very disappointed that Governor Deal chose to voice his opinion against the expansion of the law when the poll released Monday shows that 84% were in favor of the cannabis oil. This is an issue that should be decided between the doctor and the patient. Reed's doctor wants the oil for Reed, and that should be all that is needed. No one that is making the decision to allow cannabis oil to be grown and dispersed in Georgia would ever let their child go through what Reed deals with and not expand this law. This law needs to be expanded to not only allow for growing and dispensing, but also include more diseases like RDEB. The 1-to-1 ratio language needs to be removed. This should be only decided by a doctor. Again, Reed's pain level is unimaginable, and restricting components of the oil is keeping Reed from getting the full benefits of the oil. The opposition to cannabis oil is completely filled with fear. They are convinced that something that was labeled as an illegal drug can't have a medicinal purpose. Again, they would be fighting just like I am if they were in the same situation. Reed needs this oil as an option. Other people need this oil as an option. Breaking the law to bring back the oil into the state is unacceptable. The state government is forcing families to go outside the state when they could be obtaining the oil from a legitimate lab here in Georgia. You as a commission set to evaluate this expansion needs to do the right thing and convince Governor Deal to allow the expansion to go through. I hope that every representative and senator in the state looks at Reed's story and really evaluates their position. One family that we know that is using the oil for RDEB said that the oil has completely changed their life. The child can sleep, the pain is relieved, and the itching is controlled. There is no reason to fear cannabis oil. It is a natural and great alternative to the narcotics Reed is currently on. I'm puzzled why some people are against cannabis oil somehow think that morphine, methadone, and Dilaudid are okay. I will leave you with one final thing. For all the people involved with this decision, please don't fear the expansion that needs to happen to help Reed, and have some compassion. With the successful expansion that Reed needs, I hope that I don't have to fear Reed living in a life of unimaginable pain. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, I appreciate your courage in sharing your testimony today. Any questions, Mr. Underwood? And we'd love to see little Reed. Hey, buddy. She is how old?
Hi.
The members of the commission, I wanted you to hear Brian and Audra's and Reed's story. But because we've had a lot of focus on kids with epilepsy. We've had testimony about other diagnoses, but here's a diagnosis, EB, that's what's called, that would fall under what we would consider intractable pain. And so it does not meet any of the criteria. But we've got a world-renowned doctor in Minnesota, Jacob Kohler, who I chatted with this week, who is absolutely convinced that this will help this particular diagnosis. And so, so there's a couple reasons for hearing Mr. Underwood's testimony. One, we need to remember at the end of the day, the decisions we're making are affecting people's lives. And so that's why this commission's work is so important. And secondly, there may be merit to looking at expansion of the existing diagnosis that's under the current law, so that people like Reed don't fall in the cracks and are not able to get the option that they in their position feel like they should have. So that's why their testimony is so important. Mr. Rickman, you got a question? What number are you? There you go.
Hey, good to see you guys. Just a very quick comment on that discussion. I know we're going to get to this, but I want everybody to be real mindful of the fact that there is a distinction for some members of the commission between the expansion of the list of conditions versus the in-state cultivation. So by that I mean, if you hear a public position where someone says, oh, so-and-so is opposed to the expansion, there's a difference in the expansion with the conditions versus the expansion to allow private cultivation of the actual product. And I just wanted you guys to know, rest easy. I don't speak for anybody up here but me, but having talked to a lot of public safety officials, and I certainly don't speak for the governor, but I don't know of any serious opposition to adding your son's condition to that list. I mean, there's just not any. So,
and you know, I think it's there are probably less than 5 kids in the state with this disease that's serious enough to warrant this, and I'm sure none of y'all have ever even heard of this disease except for Dr. Whitmore. But it is a tragic disease, and the medicines that he's on, I mean, you cannot be on those for your whole life.
well, I think you can be rest assured that none of the discussions that we've had, that I've been a part of, if anybody says anything, makes an argument against adding your son's condition to that list. I think the trickier part is when we talk about the cultivation, but I just wanted to sort of put your mind at ease that as to that.
Well, I have a comment. I mean, I know.
If you don't mind, I'll go come up to the speakers, if you don't mind, real quick.
I know in Georgia that the ratio is
The 1-to-1 CBD to THC.
Yes, and that is an issue because he's a different case. He's on every pain medicine known to man, and a 1-to-1 ratio wouldn't even take care of that pain level. So that concerns me that that's being decided by the state. I think that should be at the discretion of the physician.
Let me add to that comment, Mr. Raymond, you're exactly right. I think most of my legislative colleagues would say, in a heartbeat, let's say at EB, they'll just a diagnosis after seeing Reed, the challenge they'll still have is getting the product. You know, I mean, we could add the condition, but they still going to have to go to another state to get the product.
And so we're going to have to do a federal crime. So it's like, you know what?
So, and that's the challenge.
It's a gray area. You pass one thing, but is it really, if it's a law, you can't obtain that.
And that's the challenge for this commission. And okay, any other questions? Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you taking the time and energy, and we sure look forward to it. Okay, here's what we're going to do, members of the commission. We're going to take a very, very short break. We're going to take 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to hear one testimony. But then we're going to delve into the real work of this commission and kind of come up with recommendations. Okay? So if everybody, we'll take a 5-minute break. We're going to come back and get going. Okay?
Shelters.
one of these meetings, and they're refusing to allow me to testify on behalf of disabled veterans.
Okay, all right.
They're refusing to allow me to testify several times.
I got the GBI director coming in.
David Cannabis, my name's David Ballinger. I've been fighting very hard for this. They're refusing to allow me to testify.
Okay, we're going to get back started. Fire, get seated. We're going to get going. Okay? Okay, now the fireworks are over, hopefully. We're going to get back. Let me welcome a couple folks who came in for our members of the commission who came in afterwards. Commissioner Gary Black, Agriculture Commissioner, we're glad to have you here. Thank you for making time to be here. And then Senator Wes Miller, Gainesville, glad to make it. Appreciate your time to be here as well. Okay, let me kind of just tell you where we're going to the members of the commission. I think everybody's back. You each should have what we sent to you by email, which was 3 different states' models, and as well as the email that I sent you that had different options that we can look at for. One of them is Connecticut's, one of them is Arizona's, one of them is Minnesota's, and then you have one item that's this that I think is going to be crucial. It's the kind of side-by-side comparison of Minnesota, Connecticut, and Arizona. Okay, now, this is what we'll work off of. So if everybody kind of make sure you have that in front of you, I think it'll be the main thing we're looking at. We're going to have 3 folks that are going to testify for us here. They're kind of industry experts, and I think they all bring a different opinion, a different assessment of things, and we'll have them testify. And then, so I hope you'll ask a lot of questions of these folks, and then after that's done, what I anticipate doing is attempting to have a consensus of what the commission would recommend. Now, we may have various opinion about what we should do, so we're going to have a good, vigorous discussion about that. But I want to keep in mind 2 points for the members of this commission. It is not the charge to this commission to decide the public policy. That is not the purpose of this commission, is to tell us whether we should grow marijuana in the state or not. That's not the. I realize we have different opinions about that, and we'll be able to express those opinions, and I think we may even do that in the commission report. But the charge of the commission is to provide recommendations of what is the best model for in-state cultivation, if it is determined that that is the public policy of the state. So just keep that in mind.
Can you reference me to the part of the statute?
Yes, I can. Give me 2 seconds. It is in chapter 50, line 230, where the commission shall have the following duties: to establish comprehensive recommendations regarding potential regulation of medical cannabis in this state. Such recommendations shall include, without limitations, specification of the department or departments that have responsibility for oversight, blah, 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 a bunch of other stuff. And then secondly, to evaluate and consider the best practices, experiences, and results of legislation in other states with regard to medical cannabis. So it is the charge of the commission to establish recommendations regarding potential regulation of medical cannabis in the state. Now, again, if any member wants to express opinion about whether there should be cultivation, we'll express that in the report. And I fully expect that may be the opinion of many members of this commission. And we will make sure that you have an opportunity to express that here and have it in the published report as well, too. The second point, did I answer your question, Mr. Goodman?
It did.
I just,
16, I apologize. It did, I think. It's just that what I heard you say is that our charge is how should we do it if it's the policy of this state to do it. And I guess that's not been my understanding the whole time.
Well, that is what is written in the statute, is to establish recommendations regarding the potential regulation of medical cannabis in the state. Okay.
And I know that's in the statute, but what I heard the chairman say was, we're not to express whether that's a good idea or not. What I heard the chairman say was, you're just supposed to say, that we're just supposed to recommend, if it's the policy of the state to grow marijuana, how do we do it?
Well, let me back up now. You can express your opinion, and we will express that in the commission's report. And we'll make that very clear that there are members that do not support an in-state cultivation model. And we'll be given that opportunity to do that today as well too. But the charge of the commission is to make recommendations if it is the public policy of the state. Does that make sense?
It does, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. It does, but I don't read the statute to say that what we're supposed to do is say if it's the policy of the state to grow it, we're supposed to make recommendations. I think it's broader than that.
Well, we can have some further discussion about that. I always hate having a DA on the commission. Love you, man. All right, the second thing, and maybe this will help. The second point that I think we need to make sure we understand, and this needs to go to the public as well too, is that any recommendation we make to the governor or the legislature is subject to the will of the governor and the legislature. This is not binding for the governor. It's not a demand of the governor. It's not a requirement of the governor. It's not a requirement of my colleagues that serve here on this panel. It is simply a recommendation per this statute, and so will be subject to the normal legislative process. It doesn't even mean that there will be a bill introduced. I have some probability that there will be. And so we just want to keep those things in mind for the commission. That makes sense to everybody? Kind of where we're going, and we'll be kind of fluid. We'll have as much discussion. We'll go. As long as we got lunch waiting for us, if we need a break and have lunch, we'll do that as well too. So, okay, that's the ground rules. So, with that in mind, Jake Bergman is our first one to come testify. If you'll come up and speak, Mr. Bergman.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I want to. Mr. Bergman spoke before one of our commission hearings earlier in the year. I think one of our first ones, maybe. But I thought it might be prudent to have him come back today, because my understanding is that you have just been awarded one of the licenses to grow cannabis oil in Florida. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so I want to just tell a little bit about that. But I also know there has been concern expressed that there's enough demand for businesses. So you got a couple minutes. Why don't you kind of real quick give your testimony.
And thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, again, for having me back. I'll keep the remarks quick. I don't have anything prepared. I jotted down a few comments. These are more or less off the cuff for me. But I kind of want to set the stage, I think, the right way for the discussion later today. I was moved probably alongside all of you with the testimonies this morning. And that's why I got into the business that I'm in. I had a very successful career in finance investments prior to doing this. And it was me seeing these stories and then reading the research that showed that cannabis-based therapeutics are an all-natural, almost non-addictive alternative to a lot of these opiates and other synthetic pharmaceuticals. And that's really what motivated me to start the company that I'm in. And so the company, by the way, is Certera Therapeutics in Florida. We do work with Alpha Foliage. That is the licensee, the one-to-one, the license is November 23rd. And I kind of view my role here in just helping you guys from the conversation a little bit as trying to find a deal, a pathway forward between the policymakers and the patients who need these products. So with that said, here are a couple remarks. So we just won a license in Florida, and we're going to be investing about $13.5 million into the Florida market to build out our cultivation and dispensing operations. The rest of my team right now is actually in Florida at a similar hearing down there on cultivation. They're about to make, authorizations to allow us to begin our operation. The system in Florida is actually more limited than the system in Georgia. There are 0 patients currently signed up. The reason that we are doing this is because once the registry is open in Florida, remember Georgia's registry opened last year, Florida's is going to open end of this year, beginning of 2016. The reason we're okay doing this, and that we would do the exact same thing in Georgia, is because once we have a business that is a regulated, consistent product, then we have all the confidence in the world that patients who need these products will sign up for it. physicians will be educated. We will help educate those physicians, and we will help, I guess, bring these products to market. So we're not worried at all about the market. In fact, that we already have patients signed up in Georgia is really a testimony to how Georgia's ahead in many ways of where Florida is. But it is behind the way, of course, that is cultivation. Another point, I know there was some talk today about being able to ship in state. I do just want to make this point because it's important from a business perspective and a policy perspective. Shipping online, or ordering online, has zero quality control. If I'm a black market drug dealer and all I have to do is slap a label on it that says it's less than 5% THC, I'm going to be shipping all sorts of stuff over the borders. And I would ask from the GPI's perspective, how you're going to actually be able to enforce this. I mean, people are going to show up and say, hey, here's my cannabis card, and here's my less than 5% THC product. How are you going to test that? How are you going to confirm that? For me, I think it's a much better option to have a regulated in-state industry that you actually know what the product is, and if someone has a cannabis card, they have to have a product from a licensed in-state producer. I think that's tighter regulation for the state than allowing shipping. And then finally, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, actually, I want to make one last point. We believe there is a way to establish regulated production under HB1. There is a section of HB1 that does actually compel the Board of Regents to work with any supplier of low THC cannabis oil to do research studies. I know there's one up and running with GW Pharmaceuticals at GRU, and I think that could be expanded to include more patients. And listen, I want to be very respectful of the process. You guys are doing what you need to do from your perspective, but I want to let everyone here know that from a business perspective, from someone who believes the same way these patients believe in the all-natural therapeutic qualities of this product, we are ready to go. We are ready to go under HB1. We're ready to go under a new system as soon as you decide what you want to do, and I'm happy to be researching it out. We are sitting here ready and willing to invest the money and to get safe, consistent products out to the patients.
Ms. Bergman, let me ask a couple questions before we go to the So you're invested, you said $13 million in Florida. Make sure I understand. $13 million in a program that you, from your perspective, is less restrictive than what is in Georgia.
Florida is more restrictive.
Right. Yeah. So the bottom line question is, if you were to be awarded a license for in-state cultivation in Georgia under the existing parameters of HB1 right now, you're fully prepared to invest that same amount of money in Georgia?
Absolutely. That's why we're here.
Okay. If there is enough demand for you and probably other investors to come.
Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Mr. Crowe? Yes. Director Keenan, you remember which one? Press that button. Okay.
Thanks for being here. As a businessman, you have no concerns with investing that type of money into an operation which is against federal law and it could come into jeopardy should the DEA step up and decide they're going to invest federal law?
This is obviously our first and primary concern in getting into business, but there is now a body of policy and law at the federal level that provides protections. I think it's the Rohrabacher-Farr amendment, the latest amendment to the spending bill. I can't remember which one it is. I'll get the exact federal bill to you. But it actually prohibits the Department of Justice from spending federal funds prosecuting state legal cannabis businesses. That is the primary piece of federal law that we operate under. The second piece is the Cole Memorandum, and the Cole Memorandum outlines 8 guidelines by which state legal cannabis business may operate without.
And the Cole Memorandum is not law. It is the policy of the Department of Justice, which is also subject to change, as is the law regarding enforcement.
That is correct, and we are comfortable making these decisions because we also look at the political calculation. And we've heard everyone talk about the poll results. 80% of people support this, and those results, by the way, are similar across the country. We don't really foresee the federal government going back and retrenching their stance.
So, all right. Dr. Shipp.
Other pharmaceuticals are made in various places. I mean, just not all the heart medications that we use in Georgia are produced in Georgia. With the laws you stated, and with the federal perceptions that you legislated, how long do you believe before it will be possible for you to use the medications that you produce in Florida other places as other medications are currently done?
Sure, and I mean, obviously, in operating under, the Rohrabacher bar amendment and the Coleman memorandum, we cannot ship, we do not ship across state lines. We will never ship across state lines until it is fully federal legal. And truth be told, it's my personal opinion. I think we're so far away from having the federal government be able to allow that to happen until there's a broad federal legalization. And when they do, I honestly think they'll probably just turn the keys over to the states and say this is the states' rights decision and let the states make the laws. So I think whether you do it now or you do it in the future, at some point the state of Georgia has to figure out what they're going to do.
I have a question as far as the lab and consistency in the lab test you do, as well as the security aspect that you have whenever the plant is being grown, cultivated, that process, the security pieces that you have in place for tracking the plant from growth to distribution. Curious kind of what you have in place there, as well as lab tests you do, consistency of the products and things like that.
Sure, and I'll take both of those. First is tracking. This isn't an immensely complicated operation. There are already existing off-the-shelf technology solutions that can track every single plant. It will automate and track the exact nutrients it gives it, whatever employee goes to interact with that plant. We're talking about fully automated, highly controlled facilities. We do recognize the security needs that are involved, and so Priva Systems, by the way, is a technology solution that does that currently for industrial scale greenhouse agriculture. And then on the pharmaceutical side or the pharmacy side, I believe PK software is a solution that we're using that tracks every single product, as well as the patient physician recommendation. So we can actually have a patient call us. We will have a call center up and running in Florida. A patient can call us and have a complaint about a product or have a concern about a product, and we can trace that product back to the exact batch that went through the extraction process, back to the exact plant, the nutrients, and cultivation center that we produced it. So it's a very, and by the way, it's not a immensely complicated system, but it's a very sophisticated system.
Okay, and then another question relates to your employees that work for your organization. Do they go through checks? What sort of process do you go for looking into even maybe past use of recreational drugs or whatnot? How do you get information on this employees to ensure that they're
Right. So, by the way, and this sounds like common sense, but nobody in our company is a cannabis user, right? That's like base number one. If you can do that, that's the only way you can really, I think, be in real business here. But unless, of course, they have a medical card in the state that they're operating in. But number two, of course, we do a very diligent background check. We do a little bit of a deeper background check than the states do, and then Florida requires a level 2 background check. So everyone across the board fully background checked, and we keep a file on everybody.
And do you use pharmacists? I remember last time that you presented to you guys to utilize pharmacists.
Right. So some of you'd asked the question earlier about the lab. We've recruited some guys in California who are doing our research and development who have both pharmacy backgrounds as well as pharmaceutical type backgrounds.
And it's not required under the Florida law.
It's not required under the Florida law, but that's the kind of standards that we want to set as a company for the way it should be done, both in Georgia and Florida. And bear in mind, this is a natural product. The extraction process is more similar to extracting caffeine from coffee than it is to creating complex synthetic pharmaceuticals. But we do still use the same people who have those analytical and organic chemistry backgrounds.
You made a statement that you characterize Florida's law as more restrictive than Georgia. In what ways?
In two ways. The list of conditions is more limited. Florida limits their conditions to seizures, muscle spasms, and cancer, or the side effects and symptoms of cancer. It also limits the THC more than Georgia does. Their limit is 0.8% THC. I believe Georgia's is 5%. So Florida is a more restrictive system, but for us, we see a huge demand for people for these health and wellness type products, and I think there are plenty of people that will find value in having all natural therapeutic cannabis products.
So the number of patients or customers, I guess, that you would anticipate would be?
So for Florida, we anticipate the estimates vary based on essentially the number of people that would sign up that qualify. Most estimates range between 30 and 50,000 patients in Florida. Georgia's population, I think we've run similar numbers, but Georgia's population is about half of Florida, so I think we anticipate 15 to 25,000. Under a limited system, Georgia's system is broader, so I think you probably have at least a similar number of patients in Georgia, if not more, if you had legal production in the state.
Thank you. I have a question regarding if it's most drugs that are synthesized have to be done so under GMP or good medical practices. Does this fall under that, or is it more of a supplement?
Yes. So we don't fall under the FDA directly, of course. These are state legal businesses, not federally regulated businesses. But part of the reason we hired pharmacists, people with pharmacy backgrounds, is because we adhere to all of the FDA standards. At some point in the future, if the FDA decides to come in and regulate us, we'll already be doing it the above board the correct way.
Questions? Director Allen, you have 13? You get the votes on.
You said you adhere to FDA standards. Which FDA standard?
And you'll probably get beyond my level of expertise very quickly, but I believe it is their standards for supplements as well as their GMP for basically pharmaceutical production. So we apply for a new drug application to the FDA. Your facility has to have a certain set of like cleanliness standards, like ISO 8000, 9000. Again, I need the exact ones that we're using in Florida, but it's held to the same standards you'd use if we were going to apply for a new drug application to the FDA.
So you're following the current good manufacturing practices.
That's correct.
And you follow the USP 795.
I believe so, but I'll check and get back to you.
And who oversees that?
So the pharmacists that we have in Florida.
I don't mean your pharmacist. What government entity in Florida?
Oh, the Department of Health is our regulator. So in our contract with Florida under our license, we're effectively obligated to do what we said we're going to do with the license. So the Department of Health is then tasked to ensure that we actually uphold the standards we say we will uphold.
Okay. So their inspectors come in and inspect you according to the GMB.
There is a hearing right now in Florida discussing this very topic. That's exactly what they're going to do.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Burke? Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate you being here. And can you hang around because we may have some other questions that we're debating, or are you going to be here for a little bit?
Happy to answer anything we have. Thank you all very much. I know it's an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our next presenter, Manny, I'm going to tee you up, but we're going to do something a little unusual. You guys will bear with me. Give me a little latitude here. Brent, do you have the video teed up ready? Yeah, the video. I want to, if you'll bear with me, okay, I'm going to hang with you. We had an opportunity, I guess about 6 weeks ago, 4 or 6 weeks ago, to take several of the commission members out to Colorado. And it was mostly law enforcement with us. It was a very, very informative trip, very eye-opening. And we had discussions about maybe going somewhere else too, possibly to a Minnesota or Connecticut, and it just didn't work out to be able to do that. But I think I would say, and I'll let the folks that went on the trip speak up, we came back from that trip to Colorado going, well, there's a real law enforcement issue out there, and raised some really, really grave concerns. Was that a fair assessment from your testimony? Okay. Again, keep in mind that it's a recreational state. There, you can smoke weed in public. You can smoke whatever. It's legalized for recreational purposes. And in hindsight, I'll say, and I'll take the blame, that I made the mistake of probably going to look at a state like Colorado rather than looking at a state that's strictly medical marijuana. And so, if you'll bear with me, I went to Minnesota on Monday, and I invited several members of the commission to go with me, and it was difficult, and they couldn't go. I did take State Representative Mike Gravely, who's here with me, in the back, and he and I went up to cold weather and took a look at what's going on in Minnesota. And to the members of the commission, you need to know it is a complete night and day difference from what is going on in Colorado. Night and day. And so I took video of what a dispensary looks like compared to what in Colorado for the folks over there. And so since you couldn't go to Minnesota, I'm bringing Minnesota to you, okay? And so if you'll just bear with me, and Brent, if you can play the video, it kind of, about halfway through, I decided to turn my phone from this way to this way, so you're going to be looking like this for about 3 minutes. And it's not but about a 4 or 5 minute video, so if you'll bear with me, let's roll the tape. Let's see. Then we're going to kind of walk through what. Sorry about that. Come in, we turn the phone out to Cannabis. Here's the state of Minnesota. I know, sorry. This is the facility where the reception area, and so the person would check in here, is that right?
Yeah,
Walk us through the quick.
They would come over to one of our computers and we would check in and make sure that they were verified with the state, as well as they have to show their photo ID to show that they are who they say they are. If they haven't finished their self-evaluation, we have them set up over there. We've got a couple of computers over there that they log in to and finish that.
Okay.
And then we just have them take a seat and
The waiting area right here. And so they don't even go forward without verifying that they've been properly registered with the state.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So once they're checked out, then they move on to a consult room. This is the area where they can do some of their self-assessment as well too. Manny, you want to walk us through there?
Sure. So all of our
Manny, you're
the CEO of Legal Doctors.
right. Okay.
Hi, folks. So all of our facility is segmented from a security standpoint. You have to be buzzed into different places. Once they verify you and once you're ready for your consult, you come in here, you meet with our pharmacist and have your initial discussion.
Okay. This is one of the consult rooms. Someone come in. There's Brad, who is the, explain your title again.
Chief Pharmacist and VP of Pharmacy.
Okay, we're at the Lifeline Labs. Michael's going in, and they're going to kind of walk through. There's a part 2 to that, so hang in there with me. So we are rolling down. This is Brad. No, if you do the other one. Who's the, explain your title again.
Chief Pharmacist and VP of Pharmacy Services at Legal.
Okay, and this is, walk just real quickly what you would do with folks here.
So when people stop in for an initial consult, we'll go through their state registry information and make sure everything is accurate, go through a drug interaction check with prescription medications and potential medical cannabis that they'll be starting. We obtain a relatively comprehensive health history, answer questions about medications, help patients select a product based on what type of conditions they have and what past experience with cannabis they have. Explain a little bit about how we make medicine and make sure that patients are comfortable, competent, confident dealing with medication. And we also set up a care plan for dosing and for adjusting doses moving forward.
And this takes about an hour, hour and a half time with each patient.
Typically, yes.
Okay, and it's and then okay. So once you're finished with them,
once we put orders together for medications that we select and dosing ranges, put that together, transmit it electronically over to the dispensary area. Where
let's show this area right here. This is where this is the.
So this is the actual dispensary area where my certified pharmacy technicians will get medications ready to be dispensed to patients. There will be double checks by the pharmacist in addition to the technicians, and then medications will be prepped with ancillary items, additional instructions for use, and will be prepared for checkout in the front here.
So this is where they after they've been approved and.
So the dispensary is a secure facility. All the medication is stored in here. This is ballistic glass. As you can see, the interaction between a pharmacist is through these. That's a function of our state law and also our belief about sort of trying to bring a sense of security and safety for our patients and the employees here.
Okay. And so once the product is ready, it would be given from the pharmacy tech to the patient at this point. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And then that's that would complete the process for customer receiving the product. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. During the wait, sometimes I'll have patients wait for the consult, and we have a comfortable environment
Okay, there's one more where we actually have a conversation with the pharmacist. Would you play that one too? It's about 2 minutes. Guys, just hang in there with me. I think it will give you an idea of that. We are rolling in. This is Brad. Again, sorry about
Chief Pharmacist, Vice President of Pharmacy Operations at Leafline Labs.
Okay.
Just walking you through a little bit of information about the types of dosage forms we have. We have oils for vaporization, we have sublingual delivery, and then we also have oral or enteral suspensions. Differences between them, vaporization pens and sublingual delivery will bypass first-pass metabolism in the liver, have a quicker onset, shorter duration, which makes them very appropriate for breakthrough symptoms. For example, vaporization pen usually has somewhere between seconds to minutes onset and lasts somewhere between 3 and 4 hours. Sublingual delivery is absorbed by the sublingual vasculature, has an onset between 5 and 10 minutes, generally depending on the patient. Duration is somewhere around 3 hours. When you're looking at oral delivery, you're looking at a delayed onset because it goes through first-pass metabolism in the liver. Like a lot of medications, typically takes between 30 minutes and 2 hours before onset of action, but once that happens, you get a duration that's somewhere between 6 and 12.
Okay, walk us through the vaporization.
Certainly.
That's a concern of folks, and show us exactly how that works.
So typically when patients end up getting an oil for vaporization, we'll have it in a pre-filled cartridge such as this, and I'd like to note that this is not actually cannabis, but just flavored oil for demonstration. But they'll get oil filled in a cartridge like this, connected to a battery, and that forms the vaporization device. Now, what I explain to a lot of patients is that I don't liken this much different than inhalation delivery, similar to an albuterol inhaler. The idea is that you're breathing in medication and you're getting very quick onset. Another stigma that people may have about this is that it's no different than smoking, and that's absolutely not the case. When you are using a device like this, you're heating the oil to its boiling point and breathing in the vapor, so there's a lot of benefits to that. One, you're not breathing in byproducts of combustion. Two, it's a lot more discreet. When people are smoking cannabis, it's very obvious that people are smoking cannabis. Three, it's a lot more efficient. When you are smoking cannabis, you are burning upwards of 40% of the drug material that's actually on the flower. So using an extracted form allows you to be a lot more efficient. Plus, it's a lot more discreet. A lot of patients have difficulty getting past using something like this and having people see that they're actually smoking. This has a great opportunity for people to be discreet about it, get their dose, put it away, and not draw a lot of attention to themselves.
That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So when?
So we just saved the state several $1,000s, not having to fly all y'all out to Minnesota and take a look. So, now, like I said, particularly those that went out to Colorado, I think you'll see it's just a completely different animal than what we're looking at, a recreational state that's kind of a cowboy state like Colorado, to a clearly defined, very restricted, very regulated medical cannabis program like Minnesota's. And so the fellow I met with, Manny, who was kind enough to meet with us on Monday and then decided, hey, this is good enough, he's probably worth having down here for our commission. Got on a plane yesterday and came down. So Manny, come on up and tell who you are. I think he's got just a brief presentation. To the members of the commission, the correspondence I've had with you the last several weeks is I've gone through this for 2 years now, and we've gone through this process, study committee last year, and then this process now. In my mind, the model that really most clearly appears to align with where we are here in Georgia is Minnesota's. And so, for a handful of different reasons. And so, I wanted Manny to kind of walk us through their program there. You guys fire away, ask every question you have. Manny, if you will, introduce yourself completely in a second, but my understanding is that, Manny, you worked for the Department of Public Health, or Minnesota's version of it, when you were writing the law for this program. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay.
Apparently, when you express a lot of opinions about how the industry should be run, the industry comes to you and goes, since you're such a smart guy, maybe you could run a company.
And that's what happened, is that right? Okay. Why don't you, go ahead, start with your testimony.
So a quick little bit about my background. I'm predominantly a regulatory attorney by training. I did that in the private sector for 22 years, but I've had the privilege of being appointed as a state regulator under two different governors, a Republican and a Democrat, which confuses people. They don't know my politics, which if you're a regulator, you shouldn't ever know my politics, right? That shouldn't be irrelevant. So I've regulated insurance companies, securities, and real estate, but more in the realm of this space, HMOs, hospitals, nursing homes, other medical industries, and especially the Office of Medical Cannabis. Our department, the Department of Public Health, was charged with the regulation of this industry, and my commissioner then, Dr. Ed Ellinger, asked me to be the representative of the administration in developing our law. So a little bit about the Minnesota model, which was passed in 2014. It's not a smoking law. Okay? It is a extracted product law. That was a very, very strong request from law enforcement. They wanted to be sure that medication being produced in Minnesota was not confused with street crime. They wanted the beat cop to be able to recognize that our product was medicine and the stuff in the baggie was not. So that was one of the sort of key criteria for law enforcement in our state. They also added the two manufacturers. Why two manufacturers? Because it made oversight and perspective easier. For a brief time period, they were looking at only licensing one manufacturer, but then the concern was about sort of monopoly pricing and also about contingency planning. What if one manufacturer had a fire or the crop was bad? How do you ensure consistent access to medication to patients? So the compromise was two manufacturers. Each manufacturer has to have 4 distribution locations. We are entirely vertically integrated in Minnesota. I'll have some opinions about that now that I'm on this side of the space of running a company. But that is one of the considerations. They wanted to be able to monitor the consistent level of quality and performance throughout the system. We talked about no smoking or raw flower. That was both a combination of the concerns from law enforcement, but actually also a concern from the public health agency. We spent a lot of time in Minnesota trying to convince people not to smoke. They suddenly provide medication that you have to burn and combust. It seemed unethical to our approach to sort of reducing the amount of smoking that goes on in our state. You must provide pills, oils, or tinctures. A physician certifies, that is their role under our program. They make no recommendation as to dosage. They make no recommendation as to whether or not cannabis will work for you. They simply certify you as a qualified condition. That was at the insistence of our medical association. They wanted to look at their role. Interestingly enough, now that the program's up and running, a number of their members are going, yeah, I actually want control over the formulation. I actually want control about how much medication my patient takes. So I will give you some feedback that I suspect you might hear different feedback from your physician constituents as you move through this program. And then lastly, it has to be dispensed by a pharmacist. We are not the only state that dispenses through a pharmacist. Connecticut dispenses through a pharmacist, and I believe also the state of New York will require a pharmacist to be on staff at each of their dispensaries. Why a pharmacist? Well, I think you heard from my chief pharmacist, Brad Carlson. Pharmacists live in the world of drug-drug interaction. Pharmacists live in the world of dosing. Pharmacists live in the world of titration. They are much more, I think, from a skill set well suited to provide a clinical experience for patients that patients should be getting. When we talked about sort of how we were going to craft this law, the word that occupied all of our attention from law enforcement, from the health department, from the patients was the word medical. Yes, cannabis was part of our program, but the real focus was on determining what made the program medical. Safe, reliable, consistent product that was grounded in some degree of science and data. Commissioner can add new conditions or product forms except for smoking. All the product must be lab tested before it goes out to patients. Registration renewed every 2 years. That's a key component of our program because that creates a remarkable incentive to ensure we are compliant.
That's registration for the licensee, not for the patient.
For the licensee, correct. So as a manufacturer, the state gets to decide whether or not I'm in existence every 2 years. That's a very strong incentive to be compliant. hospitals and nursing homes may distribute. I think that's perhaps a unique feature of our Minnesota law that was actually at the request of both hospitals and nursing homes. Once they said, okay, if this is going to be a medicine patients are going to be using, we need immunity for us to be able to handle, dispense, store the product. They do not have to. They may. There are hospitals in our state, including probably some world-renowned academic institutions that are controlling medication and dispensing for patients. They would probably prefer not to be known because there's a little thing of federal law and research funding and all that. But they're treating cannabis as part of their care delivery system. And we collect data in Minnesota. I think that is the one feature of our state that is unique to our state. All patients provide data to the department, and physicians agree to give access to their medical records to the department in the event the department requests it in order to do observational studies. So you remember in that video you shot, that one of the things the patients do is do a self-assessment every time they check in. That's to basically tell us, is this stuff working? If so, are there any side effects? What's the impact? That kind of data will be generated, collated, distributed to help advance the knowledge base and the science about how medical cannabis is working for patients. Here are the current qualifying conditions on the left: cancer, glaucoma, HIV/AIDS, Tourette, ALS, seizures, persistent muscle spasms, Crohn's disease, and terminal illness. Intractable pain was just added by our commissioner last week. He made the determination, despite the advice of his advisory commission, to add intractable pain. Why did he do that? Because he's not only a doctor grounded in science and data, but he's also a doctor grounded in compassion and belief in what is good for patients. He also did, frankly, also based on the fact that we're also working on, in our state, prescription drug overdoses. More ODs from accidental overdoses than homicides or motor vehicle accidents. It's a real problem in Minnesota. And when our pain physicians cut off a patient from getting access to opiates, they don't stop taking opiates. They access what the USA Today called the third cheapest and purest heroin market in the United States. That's a bad public health outcome in our state. So our commissioner concluded that perhaps intractable pain might be a good condition to give people an option.
Okay, Manny, let me just make sure the legislators are on here. So the law is set up so there are certain conditions, and then if someone wants to petition adding a condition, it goes to this advisory board. This advisory board makes a recommendation.
So, Representative, no, actually the decision goes to the commissioner. The commissioner created an advisory commission to handle pain. He'll be creating a similar process for new conditions.
Okay. All right.
Our law required him to look at intractable pain first, but he's not the last stop in the process. Once he makes a decision, which is why it's effective August 1st, the legislature gets one session to season or basically think about the commissioner's decision.
Right.
So, for example, if the commissioner added a condition that was
toe fungus. Sure. Then the legislature could come back and say, absolutely not. We're not going to.
Though there are some antifungal But having said that, the commissioner's decision was, the first decision he had to make was whether or not to use intractable pain. Now, intractable pain is a very specific definition under Minnesota law. It drafted in 1997, I believe, in order to allow physicians to prescribe an ongoing course of opiates. And the definition basically means if you've tried everything else and nothing is working, we're going to give you access to Schedule 2 and 3 drugs that would otherwise bring you in front of your board of medical practice and put you at risk.
Okay. The 2 points I want to make out of that, though, the legislature controls the addition of, the legislature can overrule any additions to, let's say Dr. Fitzgerald all of a sudden got a while, so we had a law in place and she decided to add something. The legislature would have if we had a law similar to that, we would have an opportunity to not put that in place before it went into place. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
As I understand it, that was actually a suggestion given to us by the County Attorneys Association because it was based on sort of the sentencing guideline approach, where you have a commission sentencing guidelines to make recommendations at the beginning of the session, but then the legislature has a full session to act on the recommendation.
And then the other question, Director Allen, you may know, is, or maybe Lynn knows, do we have intractable pain? That is in the code?
So Representative, I actually found something that might be an equivalent. This is from your Georgia Rule on Pain Management. It's chronic pain. And it's a 90-day or more period.
Okay. I was just okay, keep going, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and this is also in the same statute, I believe, or same context of like allowing access to opiates. All right, so in order to comply with the requirements of Minnesota law, we have a pharmaceutical grade manufacturing facility. This facility 9 months ago was soybean and alfalfa field. We built it from scratch. Why did we build it from scratch? Because it's been our experience that when you retrofit facilities, you invite a lot of risk of environmental contamination. So we wanted a facility built from scratch. We spent way too much money in this building because the time demands of our law were such that we wanted to be sure we were up and running for patients. When you start construction in Minnesota in the middle of the Minnesota winter, you're not exactly doing so under optimum economic conditions. But the concern from the legislature was we had patients who were in pain today or dying today. And therefore, we wanted to be sure that the manufacturers and the state got up and running as quickly as possible. Dr. Fitzgerald, if this task is handed to you, I will tell you that my former colleagues in the department are more than happy to help you with how to get this sucker up and running in a ridiculously short amount of time. And it is doable. Stressful, but doable.
Well, fortunately, Dr. Fitzgerald has a great track record. She got our registry up and going in about 60 days. So, pretty amazing. So, yeah.
So in the facility, law enforcement wanted to be sure we were secure. We have, what I've been told, is casino-grade video surveillance. We have to keep 90 days of video. This is a picture pixelated, of course, because we don't want to show you what our cameras see. But we have 80-plus different cameras, both in this facility and in our care dispensing in our patient center. It is all remotely reviewed. It is assessed. We also have operating procedures that feed into the security discussion, and I'll talk about those next. We have 20-plus different cultivars that we work with. Initially, we started based on sort of the experience that some of our consulting partners in Connecticut had. We quickly learned that the strains they were recommending for us didn't have nearly enough CBD in them. We are now growing approximately 75% to 80% of our plants are high CBD strains. Why? Because that's the nature of the conditions we're seeing, that the medicine is requiring a lot more CBD than THC. Second, you need a lot more CBD plant material to produce CBD medicine. We grow chemical-free. If you're making medicine, I think as one of the testifiers said, pesticides in medicine is a really bad idea. Whatever we spray on the plants shows up in medicine. So we try to run as clean a shop as possible. Do we use pest controls? Yes. They're garlic oil and castor oil. It smells like a very interesting Italian marinade. We grow hydroponically. That is to minimize the amount of waste from nutrients and water. That is also intended to minimize the amount of labor we do. We run a facility that's capable of serving 9,000 patients. We are running that with 6 growers. So we are a very lean shop. Another part of our security process is that we track all of our plants and plant weight. The law does not require seed to sale, but we do it for our purposes. We track every seedling, we track every plant that we dispose. We do this for a number of reasons. One is to minimize the risk of diversion, but the other is to ensure that the level of quality and consistency of our product can be tracked from harvest to harvest. We measure wet weight, we measure dry weight, we weigh our waste product. We are, not surprisingly, since we're making extraction, because growing is just half of our process, we are engaged in pharmaceutical creation. The woman pictured there, Rachel Lober, is a PhD in medicinal chemistry. She comes out of a space where that is the work she works on formulation. This is our assistant, Ryan McEnany. Ryan worked in pharma, doing development under GMP standards. We are assuming that at some point, medical cannabis will be FDA regulated, whether it will be to the standards of nutritional supplements or to the standards of FDA full drug approval. It's not entirely clear to me. I would argue that perhaps the FDA should look at another standard, which is a herbal medication standard, because one of the things we take from our company and from our philosophy is whole plant medication is what this medication is best suited for. There are standards in other countries like Germany, Canada, that we can look at for what a true herbal medication standard could look like. We use CO2 for our extraction. There are different ways to extract. Other states, other manufacturers use butane, hexane. We use CO2 because it's a safe product for our operators. Butane is incredibly flammable. And we don't then worry about any solvents showing up in the final product. We have 3 product formulations and 4 delivery methods. Brad has talked about them. They are arranged in color. The left tangerine is our high THC product. That's predominantly our cancer and Crohn's patients are getting that. The product in the middle, the blue, is called Cobalt. That is our high CBD product. That is primarily our seizure patients. And then the product on the right, the gray or heather, is a 1-to-1 CBD to THC. That is primarily our patients with muscle spasms and MS. What we are observing is that some patients actually end up picking up 2 products. They pick up our Cobalt for during the day where they want to be, where they don't want psychoactive effect, right? So Cobalt allows them to function, go to work, take care of their kids, go on with their lives, but then they take tangerine right before they go to bed so they can sleep through the night. And I know that some of us think, well, it's a big deal sleeping through the night. One of our patients said, I haven't gotten 5 hours sleep in years. That was amazing. And she came as a skeptic. So that's what makes me excited, is when I hear from our patients about how it's working for them. You've seen our Pure Delivery Center. We want to create the narrative, the feel of a clinic. I think we've succeeded because a number of our patients say, I wish my normal care delivery process or system or experience was like this. They have to be staffed by a pharmacist. They're the only ones who can dispense medication, and they must have the same security as our manufacturing location. Now, you don't notice a security guard here because what we deliberately wanted to do is use passive security, the locked doors, security surveillance, and that security is also monitored at our heating facility, Cottage Grove facility. Probably the biggest and strongest thing we do to make sure the security of our facilities is develop a good, strong working relationship with local law enforcement. Both the Egan, which is where this suburb is in St. Paul, is located, we have a strong relationship with that PD. Cottage Grove, we have a strong relationship with that PD. So the Cottage Grove PD, on a random cycle, will just patrol our parking lot. They're very, very good at working with us. We talked about that the licensed pharmacists must do the work. They're required by law to do a consultation before they dispense. That means confirming patient information, having an assessment of effectiveness. What does that mean? My pharmacist has turned away patients, right? Patient came in, seizure disorder, have a conversation with the patient. The patient says, well, I haven't had a seizure for 4 years. And my pharmacist says, why are you here? Right? Come to us and you need something else. And that's his job. As he says, the best drug he can dispense is the one he doesn't dispense. Right? He's trying to minimize the amount of medication he's providing. Now, as a CEO, I was like, But we start from the premise, and I think you guys do too, it's about the patients. And sometimes adding another pharmacopoeia to the patients is not necessarily a good thing. Changes in their medical condition were limited to a 30-day supply. The law does not define what a 30-day supply is. My advice to you guys is you might want to think about looking at sort of the THC dosing limits for Marinol and Dronabinol, and maybe using that as a guideline so that you can give your manufacturers and pharmacists some idea of what a 30 days is. Here's the patient care check-in. They check in. They can undergo they complete their self-evaluation.
You go through that.
Sure. Self-evaluation is different for each condition. They consult with the pharmacist. That prepares the order. Well, they quickly go to the consultation itself so you get a sense of that. All right. Once they're verified, they review the qualifying conditions and other conditions. Our patients have multiple conditions. They don't typically come in with just one. We go over their current meds and allergies in order to discuss some drug-drug interaction. A lot of the meds they take may be affected by cannabis, and we want to be sure they understand that. That's typically what triggers a conversation with their provider. With the patient's permission, we'll call the provider and say, we're going to be recommending this amount of cannabis in this composition. This might have an impact on the blood work. We talk about their previous experience. We then make the selection, discuss pricing. We give them follow-up plan, instructions, and then we dispense the trial. I thought you would find this interesting. The picture on the left is our patient population by certified condition. It is relatively consistent with that of the states. Cancer, muscle spasm, and epilepsy are our big three. The medicine dispensed by unit, and that means by vaporization cartridge or by bottle, is predominantly in the tangerine one. But if you were to look at bulk volume, cobalt is over half of it. Because the cobalt suspensions we provide patients are huge bottles. And you just need that much more CBD to have the therapeutic benefit. Last one, I wanted to share with you, what drove this program. This young lady, Amelia Weaver, I know you're all with me, Kelly, so came to us with seizure disorders. The picture on the left is the day before she picked up our medicine. The picture on the right is a week later. Now, have we cured her? No. We know for a fact her seizure is going to come back. But have we given her an opportunity to improve her quality of life? That's what we've done. So glad to stand for any questions.
Okay, Andy, thank you so much. Okay, members of the committee, now's the time. If you got some questions, fire away. Press your button, and we'll recognize you for. As far as you know, we had another person that was going to testify today. I think we're going to end up taking a pass on. Minnesota's is, that would give testimony to this, is the most restricted, the most regulated medical marijuana program in the country, is to your knowledge?
That's what I've been told. It certainly doesn't feel that way from our side. It just feels like this is the way you do medicine. So yeah. we assume these are the standards. If you want patients to have access to consistent, safe, and effective medication.
Okay, one more.
Thank you. So is the THC, is it A or what type of THC is it?
We have both THC and THC-A, depending on the method by which it's delivered. If it's a vaporization cartridge, the decarb can occur in the heating process, so there might be more THC-A there. If it needs to be orally available, we need to decarb it.
Okay. And then does the CBD, the cobalt, does it have any THC in it, or is it?
It has the ratio for a cobalt is 20 to 1.
21. Okay, thank you.
20 to 1 CBD to THC.
That's correct. And we'll likely be adding another formulation in the sort of 30 to 1 range, 10 to 1 range. We want to give our patients a range of options at sort of cannabinoid ratios. That's actually a good question. We're focusing right now on the cannabinoid ratios, and THC and CBD are the predominant chemicals that express themselves in plants. But we hope to eventually dial in terpenes, the aromatics of the plant. They have some data that suggests they are part of the therapeutic benefit, and there are another full range of cannabinoids. But since the plant expresses itself predominantly in THC and CBD, as Professor George Wyerland from the University of Minnesota, who's a second licensed DEA grower in the United States, said, maybe we should listen to what the plant is telling us.
And so the 20 to 1 is a 5%, by the math.
Yeah. But you also have, which is dissimilar to Georgia law, which requires a 1-to-1 CBD to THC. You actually have a 1 to 20 CBD to THC product? Is that 20 to 1 THC does CBD? I mean, if we look at it that way. Is that
We
correct?
also have a 1-to-1 CBD THC. We also have a high THC product. So.
Dr. Fitzgerald.
I have a couple of questions. One, because I certainly am interested in the data that we can obtain from all this work we're doing, this new work that we're doing with marijuana as medicine. I heard you say that when your patients come in once a month, that at that time they give a self-prescribed assessment of how they're doing. How are the physicians involved? Do the physicians simply do the physicians evaluate how they're doing at any point, or is it all patient feedback? And do the physicians recommend and then the pharmacy prescribes?
Gotcha.
So there's several questions there.
Yes. So Dr. Fitzgerald, the law allows the department to request information from the physicians about progress or how the patients are reacting to restricted medication. The department does not currently request this information from the providers for a lot of different reasons, primarily logistical. So the current data gathering portion is a patient self-assessment. The self-assessment is different by condition. For example, if it's about epilepsy, they request a number of seizures. If it's muscle spasms, it reaches spasticity. So there are different by conditions. Those assessments were created by the Department of Health. Dr. Tom Armstrong is the medical advisor or at the Office of Medical Cannabis, and he is running the research protocol. They don't expect to have data to share with the broader world until about 6 months from now, after a full year's progress. They're hoping to work with, as I understand, they are with colleagues in other states about at least getting some sort of self-reported data so that they can build a larger database. I envision that the data they generate will be useful for both clinicians and likely competitors of ours to determine what medication to use.
The other question is in a different view, and that is, can you tell us how much of an investment the state has put into developing all of this? I know that you went with the RFP method, and you have 2 companies that have come in. And my understanding is that those companies have taken on the regulation of the process and all that kind of stuff. How much has the state invested, and do you know how much the companies have invested?
Sure. So, Dr. Gerald, I believe the general revenue appropriation was about $2.5 million. That was to primarily build the IT infrastructure. You have a registry, so I think you already expended that cost. The ongoing funding of the program is intended to be funded in 2 ways. It's intended to be funded by both patient fees, the patients pay a registration fee, an annual one, and by assessments on the industry, i.e. us, for the cost of regulation. By way of illustration of what that's going to cost us next year, the enforcement assessment is, I believe, going to be $94,000 for next year. Okay. For each company, yeah.
So I want to piggyback off that question for a minute. So if you were advising us as a state that we were going to move forward with a program like Minnesota's, you would anticipate that it would cost between $2 to $2.5 million, considering that we've already spent some money on the registry.
Sure. You might be able to save some money by using your current prescription drug monitoring program to be the place and portal in which that information is tracked and viewed. I know that our pain physicians are very interested in amending our law to use our PMP to be the place where all of the dispensing location is captured. If you have a pain management contract with a patient, for example, you might want to know they're on medical cannabis so you can cut down the number of oxy they're receiving.
Okay. And then the second question, I think Dr. Fisher asked, how much did you invest your business total for the license?
So our company raised $15.8 million in capital that's intended to pay for both build out and for operating costs.
Okay. Dr. Park, did you have your? Oh, you have the answer. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Dr. Allen.
A couple. Who oversees you from the state? Who regulates you?
So our regulators, the Department of Public Health, they have worked in setting up a program in conjunction with our Department of Public Safety, our Department of Agriculture, our Pollution Control Agency on the waste regulations, our Board of Pharma with respect to sort of pharmacist qualifications, our Department of Commerce with respect to sort of fee assessment, and as part of the selection process, we also engage our Department of Economic Development to help with assessing the financial structures and financial capacity of the applicants.
So you got a whole plethora of people.
As one of the fellow commissioners told my boss, thanks for taking the hit for us, Ed, but they all chipped in.
Okay, and one other question. Offhand, somebody gets caught with some of your product that's not supposed to have it, and the Bureau up there gets it tested. Do they have the capacity to be able to test what level of THC or whatnot is in that product?
So the Bureau does have the ability to do that assessment, but one of the things the legislature did in our law was to actually make it more criminally higher for diversion of our product than for possession of raw street product. So raw street product is a petty misdemeanor in the state of Minnesota. Diversion of our product is a felony. So if you're about getting high, we're the wrong program.
Mr. Black, what number did you catch? All right. Yes.
Welcome to Georgia, and thanks for spending money with us last night.
Go ahead.
Quick question on, you said you used castor oil and what else?
Garlic oil.
And garlic oil. And those, what do your protocols and what's your best management practices call for when those two don't work?
So we then will take down a room. Luckily, we've never had to do that. But
you would do what?
You would take down a room. You would take down all your plans. You would just start from scratch. We spent a ton of that money on the HVAC in our system. We have HEPA filtration. We have consistent humidity. I want to share with you, let me quick pull it up, the lab test so you can see kind of what we do in terms of, or what we're expected to do in terms of production of product. This is a lab result that we have to do for every product that we produce before it goes out to a patient. The first thing that we do is to ensure that it's accurately labeled. Sorry, let me get to that. So that is, this is our cobalt solution. It's the CBC, CBD, CBDA, CBG, CBN, the THC product. We want to be sure patients know exactly what they're getting. Then, of course, we have to be tested for any sort of residual solvents. Then we're tested for terpenes. If patients are interested in that, we can certainly give them that level of detail. Any biologics, biological contaminants, and then finally pesticides. With respect to the pesticides, that continues to be a conversation with our Department of Agriculture. As you know, Commissioner, pesticides are approved by the FDA, so there are no FDA-approved pesticides for cannabis right now. For that reason, we choose not to use pesticides, other than sort of what I've talked to you about. And then lastly, they look for heavy metals. Knock on wood, we've passed every single one of the tests that we've conducted.
Yeah. And Mr. Chairman,
yes, sure.
One of the, I guess, real issues on that crop protection strategy, and it's misconceived, it's misunderstood. I think maybe in this arena, but it's also misunderstood in food. Something can be organic, but it can still have a pesticide.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you.
Organic pesticides are regulated exactly the same way that conventional pesticides are. And so if something can be organic, but still have a product used on it that's licensed, but even if it's not licensed for the product, it's still it's the same track.
All right, so what we do is we tell the department what we are planning on using, and then they direct the lab to look for those products in the final extract. So that's the way it tailors and narrows the lab's analytics to look for trace amounts of whatever we're using.
You tell the Department of Agriculture what you're using?
We tell the Department of Health. We provide them data on our inputs. We provide them data on our fertilizers. They walk across the atrium because the Department of Ag shares the data with the Department of Health, and they have conversations with their colleagues over there.
Sure. But that's if it's anything beyond castor or garlic oil.
No, we also told them about that castor and garlic oil.
No.
Oh, yes, if we were to use anything, which we haven't, but if we were to use anything beyond those products, we would tell the department what we're using.
Mr. Black?
Okay.
You sure? You look like you're not sure.
I don't know how they check for something that's not properly labeled with the EPA.
So the answer is they're looking for the presence of that product. Whether or not they are making an assessment about whether it's acceptable or not, our department has not gone to that step yet. They're just simply looking for its existence in the final extract.
But the critical issue here is that if anything is used that is used for a crop protection product, as a crop protection product, if it is not properly licensed and that product is labeled for the use on that product, it's an illegal use to start with.
Gotcha.
Any other questions? Okay, yeah, what number is Chief? Just a quick question. Obviously, one of the issues that I keep hearing, or recurring thing I hear in Georgia is if we allow the cultivation of marijuana in the state of Georgia for purposes such as you're doing, that'll open the Pandora's box of recreational use in the future. So, and I appreciate the clearly defined and narrowly defined Minnesota model. I can see what the appeal of that is and what we're trying to discuss. But what's the tone, I guess, in the communities of Minnesota as to the next steps? Is everybody satisfied with where you're at now and saying, okay, we've addressed the medical issue, or is there still a bigger and harder push to move towards a recreational use on the backs of the medical, which is what we obviously see in here?
So we not surprisingly have conversations with folks who want full legalization, want to be treated like alcohol. They would concede that if Minnesota ever could do that, we're going to be one of the last thirds of states to do that. I think the way to think about that is, so SAMHSA puts out prevalence use of marijuana by state, right? And the states where there is a cannabis culture, so Colorado had like 13% of adults saying they use cannabis. Number one is a surprise to me. It's Vermont. 20% of adult Vermonters say they use cannabis on a regular basis. Minnesota's around 5.7%. We don't have a cannabis culture, and when you look at public polling in Minnesota, in the same way that the public was overwhelmingly in favor of medical, last polling I saw, 83%. We've barely broken 50% on full adult use, and that was one poll. For the most part, we're in the sort of 40s. A lot of that has to do with Minnesota has so you've heard us called the land of 10,000 lakes. The other joke I've heard is we're the land of 10,000 chemical dependency centers. We have a very healthy appreciation for abuse of legal recreational substances. Minnesota has one of the highest rates of binge drinking in the country. So we understand that just because something is legal doesn't mean it's not potentially abusive. That's my very long-winded way of saying it. I think we're in the last group of states that becomes a full adult recreational state.
In fact, didn't you tell me the other day that the people who were mad at you the most when you were going through this bill were the people who wanted to legalize marijuana for recreational?
Yeah, it's one of the advocates told me this bill is too medical.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that's exactly what you wanted.
I thought that was the idea.
Yes. Director Keenan, which number are you? Push that button. And Dr. Keenan, I'm gonna preface your comments too. I know you had said there were some concerns about that law enforcement had initially about your bill, and they finally got comfortable with it. Dr. Keenan, if it's okay, I know you had a conversation with someone from up Minnesota. Would you mind, in addition to your questions, kind of sharing that conversation as well too?
Yeah, sure. My question is this: I understand from this information that you have 741 patients that are signed up, and your company has $15 million investment. How are you making a profit?
Mr. Keenan, we're not expecting to make money for a long time. When I was at the department, I stood in front of a crowd of about 300 interested applicants or interested parties, and I warned them that you're not making money for a long time. You will eventually make money, but you better be prepared to be in it for the long haul. Apparently, I didn't remember that advice to myself when I took this job. We are planning to have to do this for the long-term sustainability. In fact, I would caution you or have you tempered when you think about sort of the cost of the program and the fiscal estimates of running this program. Expect enrollment will be slow, and then you will see some kind of spike in enrollment in year 2 or 3. That's the way our program is rolling out. That's consistent with the experience we've seen in Arizona, the experience we've seen in Connecticut or Massachusetts. It takes time for people to be comfortable with the program. The other observation I make for you is that a true medical program is not a very big program. If you're envisioning Colorado level enrollment, that's the wrong metric. Right? Maybe a better role model or rule of thumb would be to look at the patient enrollment in the country of Israel. In Israel, the physicians are certified, they prescribe. The medicine will now be, starting next year, be able to be picked up in pharmacies throughout the state. They have 30,000 patients out of a population of 8 million. So if you're looking for a rule of thumb on what a true medical program may look like, I think those are the kind of states, kind of countries that might be a good addition.
15.
Mr. Chairman, at your request, I talked with Dennis Flaherty yesterday, who is he's the executive director of one of the law enforcement associations in Minnesota. I think he actually represents the group that represents the rank and file law enforcement officers. And I had a very short conversation in 15 minutes. And in summary, what he said was that law enforcement had major concerns when this first came up in Minnesota, and that they had strong dialogue with their legislators, and that the legislators had incorporated some of their concerns into the law that's been outlined here, some of the restrictions. He said at this point they have not seen law enforcement problems associated with their state program. But that last week, intractable pain had been added to one of the list of illnesses that you can have prescription for, can have access to. So they don't know where that's headed. They were concerned that this was the first step toward recreational marijuana, and that they'll see what the future holds. But at the current point, they're not seeing law enforcement programs with
the current law.
With the current law. And we can contrast that with what all of us saw with Colorado, and I think you saw what they're dealing with. Law enforcement there is in absolute shock with the public safety disaster that has occurred in Colorado because of the way their program initiated and the outcome where they're dealing with. So that's not what is on the table in Minnesota, and hope it doesn't go that way. Yes. But that's just one of the things that Dennis Flaherty is concerned about, what will happen in the next few years.
Sure. I appreciate you reaching out to him. I appreciate taking time to do this.
Well, I appreciate your giving law enforcement a voice at the table with this. You have been very gracious and accommodating and listening to our concerns and soliciting input from us.
Well, and that won't change, Director. It's whatever path we go down next year, introduce some legislation or not, or enforcement needs to be at the table, and will be at the table, and should be at the table. So, okay, let's see, I'm not sure, let's see, is that Sheriff Goodrich?
Yes. First, apologize for stepping out. I know I told you guys we'll try to talk law enforcement, but that was the sheriff from Dakota County, where you're from, that was calling back, so I wanted to take his call. Pretty much echoes the same thing Vernon said, and he said, you know, they just had to get some tracking to the pain, and he says, we're all nervously waiting to see where it stops. He said they're afraid it's going to turn into the same fears that we have here is, once it comes into that, and you allow these doctors to start prescribing, we're afraid it's going to be just like the pill mills are here when they just give it to whatever for anybody. He said, there's money involved in it. He said it's big business, but pretty much echoes the same thing. He says right now they don't have any issues
Under the current law.
Under the current law. He says that, and I was trying to get some definition from him on like dealing with people that we deal with in traffic accidents or just driving under the influence. What part of THC do they have anything in Minnesota yet to say how much is too much? And he says there's really no definite answer for this number. Is like DUI, alcohol's 0.08. There's no number for THC. He said they just have to go based off their driving manifestations and how they act. He says, but that's the only issue that they're seeing coming.
Okay. Sure. Sheriff King, I'm going to ask you a question, and this may kind of take us to the next phase too. But I know y'all came back and expressed concern about what's on Colorado. If we were gone to Minnesota and chatted with Manny and their law enforcement, and you were communicating that back to this commission and to the governor, would it have been a different perspective, and would the feedback have been different?
No, not from my position. Although I got really did. I've talked to my counterparts in Colorado before, but all was absolutely appalled what's happened there. But looking at Minnesota, it would not change my position, the way I see this, that we're going around existing federal law, that we're ignoring the FDA, we're ignoring their guidelines. We're going to maybe in the business of licensing the production of a product that is not a medicine because it's not recognized and understood by the American Medical Association. So we're ignoring all the existing structures out there to go down this road and not knowing what the outcome's going to be. So I'm a lawman. I follow the law, adhere to the law, but I have a major concern circumventing federal law, which is what happens in Minnesota, is what happens in the other states. And this needs to be handled at the federal level. I do applaud Minnesota, though, as one of the points I made earlier. If you're going to do this, then you follow the FDA regulations as far as the manufacturer, the distribution, the transportation, and all the security requirements that go with that. So you really make it a pharmaceutical process.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I asked, the governor's executive legal counsel, I'll let you pitch in if you want, but I know the governor has expressed concern about the law enforcement feedback he got. And I've been kind of beating the drum that Minnesota's a different animal, and it's a different format, a different structure, and that possibly could calm the fears that the governor might have. And so that's why I'm posing the question to you, Director King. I mean, would your feedback have been to the governor? Well, if it's set up like Minnesota, yeah, okay, and doesn't go any further, then yeah, there are not law enforcement concerns there now under the current law.
But they're only less than 2 years to the law.
Sure.
I'm not appalled what I hear in Minnesota. I'm appalled what's happened out in Colorado and where some of the other states are headed to. Right. And I want to see Georgia go there.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Let's see. Dr. Fitzgerald, you have a question?
Yes, it's along the same thing. Again, we're talking about marijuana as medicine. So it seems to me that the more we listen to it, there's a real federal problem here. Again, if it's medicine, it isn't necessarily produced, it doesn't have to be produced in the state where you use it. So can you give us any different insight for what you see as, like for example, the federal government has a legalized growing facility in Mississippi, for example, that belongs to the federal government. Can you see any change in the federal government that would allow, for example, a facility such as yours, which obviously has admirable qualities, to be utilized? I mean, because you spent $15 million so far for 740 patients, and we have 700 more. I mean, do you see a situation where a facility such as yours might make your goods available to patients in other states?
Dr. Sherrill, not unless federal law changes. I think like the other manufacturer, we really don't want to take on a risk. I know it sounds remarkably odd to say, why not take any risk when you're already breaking federal law? But having said that, the Code Memorandum is pretty clear about where they will allow a state-regulated industry to move forward and where they will not. And so therefore, transshipment of our product is one of those things we just have to do. Now, having said that, it wouldn't surprise you that we might be in conversations with neighboring states about the possibility of reciprocity. Wisconsin and Iowa allow for the possession of high CB products without any means of actually procuring it. That is one approach. It is suboptimal from the perspective of controlling your product. It is suboptimal from the perspective of the patients having to do a lot of driving to get access to medication. But that is one sort of way you can achieve that purpose. It's my assumption that in 5 to 7 years that the feds will regulate medical cannabis. And then they will leave it up to the states to figure out what to do with it. They'll use in the same way that they do up to the states to do what they want to do about alcohol. But it is my belief that we will have a national medical cannabis program in a matter of time. In the meantime, you have patients that you kind of need to take care of.
Yeah, in fact, probably one of the things that I'm going to ask this commission where I think we can find consensus is that we've put in the commission's report that we're going to push our congressional delegation to take action. I think we probably could all agree that that's needed at the federal level. Okay, let me just take a quick visit with everybody. I know there were one or two that needed to leave early. Commissioner Black, you have to leave. Okay. Everybody else can stay. I promise we're not going to go much longer, but I think it may be prudent for us to take a quick break for lunch. And we've got lunch with the commission right here for members, not audience there on the sixth floor. Is that right? There's a on this floor, on the other side, there's a cafeteria. So I think what we may do, sir, you got a question? Mandy, I think you've got to leave. Is that right? By certain
1:30, but I'll stick around if not sure time.
What I think we may do, Commissioner Black, you got somebody that's going to come in your stead? Okay, you kind of give input. Okay. Here's what we'll do. It's 12:20 right now. For the commission members, right down the hall, we've got lunch for you. We're going to take a 35-minute break. We're going to come back at 1 o'clock. We're going to try and very quickly proceed with making decisions about what the commission is going to do, and then get out of here as quickly as we can. That fair? That good, everybody?
One last question.
Yeah.
One last question. Regarding,
let me hit you.
It seems that intractable pain is the slippery slope. Well, maybe all this is a slippery slope, but that is the key that I think that we've all been kind of focusing on is the chronic pain, the intractable pain. How is it diagnosed in Minnesota?
Senator, the current definition requires a physician to certify that pain is unsusceptible to treatment that has been tried. It is a current definition that exists in our controlled substances prescribing law. In the past, when a physician was prescribing an ongoing course of opiates that could expose them to discipline from their board medical practice, the legislature passed this definition in '97 in order to ensure that for patients truly experiencing unrelenting, uncurable, essentially incurable pain.
So a single physician, it's kind of like a dual physician, like you go to one doctor and he says, yeah, you got intractable pain. You go to a completely unrelated physician and he gives you the same diagnosis, so it's just one doctor.
Except the department would require that physician to be in relationship with the patient in order to satisfy the requirements of medical cannabis law. So in Minnesota, the drive-through certification for hire business model would be allowable.
And is that same protocol in place with opiates?
This is the exact same protocol for opiates.
So if you're having that same problem with opiates, which you're saying that you have a lot of pain doctors that are prescribing opiates and a lot of drug abuse there?
I would say that the amount of prescription drug. So if you recall the history of pain management and opiate use, we started with we didn't treat pain well enough, right? We had a public health problem. Pain is a real thing. It's debilitating. It causes economic distress. In response, our physicians stepped up and started taking care of patients with pain. Did we maybe step up too far? I think that's a consensus. So I think actually in conversations with our pain physicians, they like the opportunity to have another option in their portfolio of options to give patients that's less addictive and safer.
So if you're having an effect on the opiates and you're using the same protocol for the medical marijuana, wouldn't you expect the same?
Well, it's not causation. I'm reminded correlation is not causation, but there is studies by the Journal of American Medicine that says in states with medical cannabis programs that include pain, the number of opiate overdoses is lower. And the gap between cannabis states and non-cannabis states gets larger every year. There are some possible theories. There might be substitution going on. People on opiates would rather take cannabis instead. That's probably a good trade-off from that sort of safety perspective. Or in some cases, the use of cannabis allows them to take fewer opiates. Rather than totally switching, the current opiates they take are more effective. So I would posit from a sort of risk-benefit analysis that adding cannabis would actually likely reduce the impact of opiates from a public health perspective.
Thank you. Okay, we will be adjourned until. Yes.
The hard work and the rest of the commission. It won't be. There's a couple things I better say. He said, and then the rest of our team, our representative will, I think, fall in line on some of the other recommendations. First, as you know, my primary concern with regard to respect to cultivation has always been whether it's going to be considered pharmaceutical or if it's agronomic. If it's agronomic, it opens up Pandora's box in a multiplicity of ways that engage departments of agriculture. That we can show you some horror stories also there from the cultivation in Colorado with respect to seed laws, pesticide laws, a wide range of things that are much. And so our position on all of these has always been, as I've told you, that if public policy of the state of Georgia is going to be to do this, and to do any of the other plans that you propose, it has to go down the line of pharmaceuticals where it be regulated in that regard and not with under the auspices of Title II, 4, 10, and others. Now, the only one that's different from that is recommendation number 2, with respect to just hemp production, because the hemp production is always considered agriculture because it's thrown over into the Farm Bill. Right. But for the same reasons, my concerns about that legalizing hemp production for the same reasons, because they would be done in a field. There are huge implications for the legality of seeds, the legality of crop protection products that are used with them. And so
if I'm hearing you right, you would not recommend not recommend a hemp getting us in compliance with the Farm Bill for production of hemp.
Precisely. And there are numerous problems in Tennessee. It's been promoted in Kentucky and some other places, but that's not a path I'm willing to go down right now. But thank you for letting me say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll be back here at 1:00. Thank you. Member of the commission, for
It is.